Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
You need one? I guess.
It's been around the honey. I guess it'll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Linda, you know, she's got, so she may come. She wasn't.
At 11.
Do you need?
Linda said start coming late.
Okay. Then we'll start.
I can look the heck.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
You have to sign.
Sign in? Me? Not me. I didn't write it.
No, but you're giving it a chance.
Thank you.
Pops.
Okay. This one, yeah, you.
Huh? Pops.
It's Pops.
I saw it in your slides. I was like, oh, I like that.
Thanks. I've heard it many times.
Help. They do.
Great.
Visuals are great.
Very good.
All done.
Okay, we are live. Everyone, we are live. Good evening. It's Thursday, February 6th. This is the meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Facilities Committee. I'm chairing this evening Ed Tate School Board, and we'll go around the table first with introductions, please.
Tracy Osecki, School Board.
Oh, Larry, that's it.
You're Pilot School Board?
Ann Horner, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board. Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Nicole Khan, School Board.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Tony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Jessica Binda, Supervisor of Facilities.
David Schrader, Schrader Group Architecture.
Doug Taylor, CHA Consulting.
Thank you, everyone. We will turn the meeting over to Ms. Binda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As a reminder that for reliable, accurate, and up-to-date information about our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. Especially in regard to the Facilities Master Study, we will discuss this evening. We urge the community to be judicious in choosing where to obtain information. Recently, there was a newspaper article that mischaracterized the progress of our work. We want it to be clear that at this time, no master plan has yet been approved by the Council Rock School Board. In addition, we caution the public about relying on social media for accurate information, as unauthorized accounts using the Council Rock name post false and misleading information regarding Council Rock matters. If you question what you are seeing, need additional details, or a reliable fact check, please contact the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at crsd.org. Items for our agenda this evening include the Churchville HVAC controls upgrade, Richboro Elementary School paving change order, review of Facilities Department funding, master planning options, financial planning, and the district-wide facility study, master planning, and facility assessment. First item, Churchville HVAC controls upgrades.
Yes.
Is the existing,
What is it called? I'm sorry.
it's Ecotrol.
Ecotrol, okay.
But we don't have remote access into it.
Gotcha.
That system, when it was installed 8-10 years ago, it didn't have that capability. So we would like to upgrade it.
So this is an upgrade. Okay, thank you.
First of all, I just
That one?
want to announce that I am here now, Michael Roosevelt, board member. And second of all, I want to find out, was this budgeted for, or do you currently have room for this to be in the budget?
So we are going to be using part of the summer projects to fund this.
Great.
Ms. Chick?
How old is Churchville? When was re?
14, 15 years ago, something like that, somewhere around there.
2011. And every other elementary school has this, including Newtown and Green Welsh. did we do this like on the fly, you know, piecemeal when the other ones got done?
I can't speak on why Ecotrol was selected at that time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a huge number. I mean, $500,000 for, I don't wanna say an upgrade, you know, are we really getting anything out of it? I
But
mean,
we're getting a tremendous amount. So the issues that we had over the summertime there, this will stop it.
Mold issues?
Yeah. What are these? The mold. Remember how we had some mold at the end of the year and we had to clean the entire school? This will give us, this upgrade will give us the ability to be able to remote in, survey what's going on in the building. My 2 HVAC specialists are constantly on Johnson Controls and Siemens to make sure that we've got buildings to where they need to be and that we don't have issues. The major problem with this is, with the existing system, is that we don't get alerts. All the alerts that have problems are all local. So if the building mechanic is not in for a couple days or he's out doing building mechanic stuff, we're not getting the alerts that something's going down or something's going wrong with it. So having the ability that both of our HVAC specialists and our, what's Gary's title?
Building mechanic.
Well, Gary's title, the manager of facility, or manager of maintenance. It gives all three of them the ability to see what's going on within the building. Like I said, if a boiler goes down in the wintertime or a chiller goes down, we would get those alerts immediately. Currently, if something goes down, we don't know until we come in the next morning.
And then Mr. Dado?
So the other buildings that have had this done, it is a lot of money. So it's consistent. This is a consistent cost with like when the other,
Yes.
it's not something that's, increased dramatically.
No,
inflation or
no.
something like
So we did a very similar, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We did a very similar controls package whenever we did Richboro. Richboro probably has more than this because it was a brand-new building with all new, brand-new HVAC equipment. But it's similar to what we have at Richboro, Hillcrest, Sulfine Stone.
Okay. And none of the equipment is getting upgraded, it's just the
No,
controls of the HVAC.
it's just controls, and we have the ability, because it's newer equipment, I mean, it is 14, 15 years old, but because it's newer equipment, we have the ability to tie in to a new system.
I do have a question, couple, because I guess Holland's one of the older schools too. So I guess that was retrofitted at some point, Holland?
Yeah, so when Holland was renovated, Holland Elementary, it is connected to Johnson Controls. All the controls there are in Johnson Controls. Again, when Churchville was renovated, I don't know why Ecotrol was selected.
That's good, because I think that Churchville was kind of just about the next one after, Holland was the next one after Churchville. So what I found and what I've observed is that Churchville renovation wasn't complete compared to the standards of renovations we've done now. And I've seen it where, I'll tell the story again, that, we walk into Churchville, into the classroom, and it's the middle of the summer, and it's hot. It's hot in this room. The unit's not working. And then I'll go over to Welsh, which is ready to be, is on list to get renovated, or higher on the list to get renovated next. It's an ice box, and it's it's a new, the structure, the bones are brand new, like say 20, 30 years, whatever, versus the guts of Churchville are from the 60s, from the early 60s. So it's one of our oldest elementary schools, along with Holland. So I think if you're spending $500,000, that's good if we're gonna see that it's actually gonna improve the air quality, but there is a mold issue, right, as you said, I mean, and it's not like you're gonna get rid of it, it's there.
Well,
You will never abate it 100%, just
Well, the mold issue was related to the system,
ceilings. The roof.
no. It was related to the fact that the HVAC, we were running the HVAC way too low. And it wasn't being monitored so that it was fighting the humidity in there. So it just kept pumping cold air, and it was increasing the level of humidity instead of pulling back. Because there's curves that the lower the temperature, the higher the humidity, and the more chance of mold. But if we were able to raise the temperature within the classrooms and reduce the amount of humidity in there, and also control some of the additional valves that are in this project, we would have been able to reduce the amount of humidity and not have mold within the building.
I'll just finish with this, because we're about to spend $500,000 on which, so you're getting a lot, as you said, if you're touching on every classroom.
Yeah.
With some of that unit stuff. I just think if you were to compare the two schools I just mentioned, Wellsford, and you're gonna do a full rehab on Welsh before Churchville, I don't see it that way. I see Churchville and Holland needing full renovations, even though they were done before. And that's part of what we'll speak about later. It's not on the list, it's not even close, but these are my own, from what I know. Just a regular guy, but I like to fix things. And I think that this just shows, just a time for me to say Churchville needs a lot more help than what I think we're looking at it getting.
Okay, Ms. Pally, then
Can I-
Mr. Roosevelt?
I just want to make sure one thing with the whole mold conversation. We did have additional sampling done after the remediation was done. We've continually monitored, so I know there's probably some still concern from some people, but we have had numerous testing done across the building in random rooms, and all testing since then have come back at all appropriate levels.
Yeah, I think we all agree it's a big amount.
It absolutely
That's
is.
why we have a lot of questions. Did you say the building is about 14, 15 years old?
Since the renovation.
Okay, so, and then we spent this money for the controls. What is the expected lifetime of the equipment? I mean, if the equipment goes back, would we have to pay $500,000 for controls on top of the new equipment?
So if we would say we'd have to replace a rooftop unit, the good thing is that the wiring is there. So whenever you have a new piece of equipment come in, you're able to reconnect the wiring, because most of the most of the equipment that comes in now is all backnet controlled. So we're able to tie in the new backnet into the existing system.
Okay, so even if you need to replace the equipment, you can still use the controls that you're going to install.
Yes, because until we do a major renovation there, we're going to have to maintain the existing equipment there. So unless we have, if, say we had a fan coil unit go down, we're going to be replacing it with a new fan coil unit that's similar to what's there. We're not going to be, going to a different type of system unless we do a major renovation, which, I don't know. Depending on what we get from this, we'll determine when we do a major renovation, but
But that is not even on the list, right?
Correct, it's not, it's not.
Thank you.
Has a test been done to evaluate the infiltration on that building? In other words, how tight, this may be more to Doug, but how tight are the windows and the doors?
Yep, so we repaired this past summer, we did know we had some water infiltration at the not second story, but clear story of the cafeteria, and we put those panels up to stop that. And when we did do the air testing, part of that was a humidity test. We don't have any visuals of water infiltrating the building.
I'm thinking more air infiltration regarding around windows and doors as it pertains to junction controls and the HVAC and the air issues.
No, we haven't done any kind of air testing or any kind of water infiltration testing with a hose or anything, but.
Yeah, I mean specifically air infiltration, typically around windows and doors and penetrations, they're not air sealed tight. They can be, but for an older building, certainly they weren't paying as much attention in that construction to keep that air, the hot or cold air outside and the warm or cold air inside. And if it's leaking, it's effectively like leaving your windows and doors open as you're running the air conditioning or the heat. It's just going outside. So just trying to get an understanding if that was evaluated.
So Churchville, was being wrapped up when I came on board at Council Rock. So I came on board and helped close the project out. But it was 15 years ago. It does have curtain wall systems and backer rod and sealing around the windows. So they did replace the windows at that time.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't involved in any testing of the building envelope when that happened. But
we do.
certainly did moisture testing and, infiltration testing, but not a thermal test or any kind of air test or anything like that.
And we do visual inspections periodically of any kind of caulking on the outside of the buildings. So if there's anywhere that's open, that's visually open, we would repair that. Is there anything, we know the caulking dries out, gets brittle. If we would find that, we would definitely be repairing that. But visually, we haven't seen anything.
You mentioned that we're gonna need funds from our summer projects. Any idea of how many funds?
It's the $500,000.
Oh, so it's the whole,
Yeah, it's the whole thing.
okay. I thought maybe there was, because somebody said, is it budgeted? And I thought you said not all of it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, if I said I misspoke, no, it's
Maybe I just
coming out of
misinterpreted.
it comes out of our summer projects.
Okay.
Anybody else, or are we okay to move this on to our next business meeting? Hearing no objection.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is Richboro Elementary School paving change order. We had to do some full-depth paving repair of 7,250 square feet in various sections of the existing parking lot. Additional paving repair was required for the electrical trench. As you can see, this is a pointer, in this area right here with the blue, and same with this area right here. Whenever we removed the top layer, there should have been a base layer that was functioning, but you can see that there is a nice big area that is exposed. And if we would have paved over that, it would have been cracked probably today with this weather, with the freeze thaw. So we had to do a full depth replacement, replace the base layer so that we could pave. And there was quite a few locations across the parking lot. It was an unforeseen condition because the existing paving really wasn't showing any kind of spidering or any kind of cracking that would have indicated that we had to do a full depth replacement. So as they were doing this, the CHA staff that was on site was able to pick this up quickly so that we could continue with paving and not have to remobilize. So it'll be additional cost to Penn Builders in the amount of $50,664.28.
They come out of the project budget.
Yes.
Questions?
Since there was no other questions, I have one, and maybe it was already addressed. The signage on Upper Holland Road, is there any way to turn it down so it's not like Rudolph?
We did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Problem fixed. Wonderful. Any other questions, comments about this one? All right, it'll be on the next agenda.
Okay. All right, before we move into the kind of master planning type stuff, just wanted to kind of review the upcoming agenda items for like the business part of our meeting. We'll have the continue with the district-wide facility study. We'll have the 2025 summer projects, district-wide HVAC filters bid, everybody's favorite, the wood gym floor refinishing bid, the fuel oil and gasoline supply bid, and then also the propane supply bid. Okay. Next, we are going to take kind of a little bit of a step back to make sure that everybody is aware of the facilities department funding. As you can see on the screen and in front of you, the facilities department has 3 buckets of money. We have a maintenance bucket. We have summer projects. Then we have capital projects. So all three buckets of money come out of items that you guys approve, gratefully, that you guys approve monthly. So the first one is the maintenance bucket. The purpose supports the maintenance and operations of facilities, covers building repairs, preventative maintenance, utilities, and custodial needs at district buildings. The funding source for our maintenance bucket is the general fund. So when you guys review yearly and you approve the overall budget for the general fund, part of that is maintenance. Examples are boiler maintenance and repairs, fire alarm maintenance and repairs, natural gas, electric, propane, and water, air filters, refinishing gym floors. Those are all items that are part of the maintenance bucket. Next, we have summer projects. So these are the projects that CHA helps us with. The purpose, it supports critical facility upgrades during the summer months. Projects range from paving and sidewalk repairs to chiller replacements. Our annual budget for that is about $6 million. The funding source for that comes from capital reserve. That comes from, most of the time it comes from the, all the time right now, all the time it comes from the, I'm sorry?
Transfer.
Thank you. The budget transfers. From like the end of the year, when we have the funds remaining, we are able to transfer money and utilize that for, the projects similar to like the South Track replacement that we did last year, Churchville and Goodnoe paving and concrete repairs, Newtown Elementary chiller replacement. So all those projects that we are going to come back to you guys in about a month to say, we would like to approve to do those projects. So again, that comes from the summer projects. Lastly is the capital projects. Purpose of that is used to fund large renovations, additions, new construction. Projects ensure long-term improvements to district buildings. The funding source is capital projects fund via bond borrows. Examples of these projects are Feinstone Elementary additions and renovations, and the Richboro Elementary School additions and renovations. So when we start talking about the master plan, it's the capital projects bucket that we're talking about. When we talk about the summer projects, it's the summer projects budget. So I want to make sure that it's clear that the reason why we still do summer projects is that we need to continue to maintain the buildings that we have. So that whenever we choose to do major projects, major capital projects, we're able to do that as well. And then we turn it over to the summer projects and to maintenance so that we can maintain those buildings and protect the investment that the district has made. Okay?
Thank you. Very helpful.
All right, does anybody have any questions?
I'll make one. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, are we talking about this that was circulated? Are we talking about master plan, or are you just asking us questions about the three buckets?
Just the three buckets.
Good there.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, because for the public to understand exactly where the funding goes, where it comes from, how it happens, and what we do with it is very important.
Indeed, yeah, thank you. And the only thing I'll say is that when I joined the board 8 years ago, the summer projects budget was $2 billion.
Yeah.
It's now 6, and that's a good thing, because otherwise we would be deferring maintenance and buildings would be leaking and growing mold and so forth and so on.
And then this bucket has to get much bigger.
Yeah. So it's pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah.
So we're going to move into the discussion of the facility study and the master planning process. I just want to say one thing before we get started. I just want to clarify actually 2 points before we get started. We do not have a draft master plan. We don't have a master plan. it's confusing, and I understand why there's been some misinformation, but we're not there yet. This is a process.
The plan is just the wording.
Yeah.
It's just the wording.
Yeah,
That is, kind of throws people off, I believe.
yeah.
I think to understand it is a process.
It is yeah, and this is a facility study we're gonna be talking about. And the other thing, my prop is not as good as it's been this, but, there was some other misinformation that we don't have a good assessment of the district's facilities. This is it, and this is the Council Rock School District's capital improvement plan, 5-year capital and facilities improvement plan. Anybody who wants to go through it, they can look at it now if they want, but you can, anybody from the public who wants to look through this can come to this building. You want to make an appointment first, right?
Yes,
Please.
And go through this. And all these tabs, let's see, there's 31 tabs plus another, I don't know, 13. This was first created by Mr. Taylor about 10 years ago or so. And we got one of these every year updated as board members. And, you know, there were copies here at the administration. And it was updated every year. So Council Rock has always had, for the past 10 years, a really good assessment of our facilities and their condition, including what kinds of repairs and work was necessary. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. So, go ahead.
Thank you.
Nikki.
I just want to piggyback off what Mr. Tate was saying. I was looking back through my notes, and this conversation, as far as I can see, started back in May when we talked about a master plan and hiring a consultant and going through that process. And I think Ms. Horner touched upon it as well. You know, we've had every wording from master plan, which we've continued to use, and even Mr. Tate and I have talked about that. We've always had the word update, we've had discussion, we've had ongoing, and this, you know, goes all the way to, like I said, 9 months, where at every facilities meetings, we've had a section where we've had some sort of discussion, update, or planning process of it. So I thank Mr. Tate for clarifying that, and I agree. Like I said, going back all the way to May, we have this discussion. So there is no plan. This is what we're sitting at this point for currently.
Mr. Roosevelt.
Just to sort of continue this from a different angle that hasn't been addressed. I completely concur with what has been said, but this is an assemblage of district-wide problems and presumably district-wide solutions that this board, this district is putting together, what we are referring to as a master plan. It doesn't mean it's written in stone. It means it can change. To Mr. Tate's point, that book represents approximately 5 years, but we want to expand this out beyond that. And it may change from year to year, but this is good because I am pretty certain that during Mr. Tate's first couple of years, some of the things that we are likely to discuss were discussed in some part back then. And so this is really a grouping of a lot of issues encompassing a lot of years that dovetail in with education that this board is looking at to get ahead of this, to effectively resolve the criticism that Mr. Tate referred, that we as a board don't have a good idea of our facilities. This is exactly why this process is being undertaken. So to take it a step further, ultimately, if we end up all agreeing or voting, however you want to think about it, on this plan, that doesn't mean that we voted and agreed for every one of these projects to start. This is just agreeing that we have a plan now, and that plan can change. But ultimately, to start any one of these projects that we're talking about or not talking about, and ultimately will talk about, we would have to vote for that individual project. I think that's a good reminder for everybody in the audience as well as everybody around this table, that we're not ultimately voting to take on tens and millions of dollars of projects right now in this process, unless anybody disagrees with me.
Good. Ms. Holly.
Since we're talking
Yeah.
about history, so this is my 4th year on the board, and I remember the binder that Doug used to put together, which is like a snapshot of what's going on now. But we had discussions about possible issues that will emerge and what are we going to do about that. And it's not until, I think, 9 months ago that Ms. Khan said that we as a board decided it's time to do something about that. And we have a study that will do a forward-looking on all the possible issues and challenges, and then this board will try to figure out what's the best way to go, how to navigate into the future. And, as you said, this is a process, it's gonna take time. We just started. I think we have some great information, but will be a lot of back and forth and try to figure out what's the best solution going forward. And for me, a big part of it is the financial part. And there are a couple of slides that from Mr. Rapp in this presentation that I hope we're gonna go over in terms of like our borrowing power into the future and so on. That's a very big part, because if we had the money, we'd do everything like right away, but we don't. So we have to be very responsible, have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers, and we have to do the best decision based on the money that is available or we're able to raise.
I just want to, on the building condition book that you presented just a couple of, that book has been updated every year for the last 10 years or so. 13, I apologize. 13 years, so that's consistent. That is not the same thing as the plan that we're talking, when we say master plan, it's not the same thing as that. I also want to say that binder that's been going for 13 years, that is available for the public to view in this building. We do not provide copies of that to the public, like personal copies, because it does contain floor plans for all of our buildings and specific information about the makeup of those buildings that we do not want bad actors to be able to get a hold of. If you would like to see it, please make an appointment with either my office or with Jess's office, and we'll make a time for you to come in and look at it. You'll be allowed to look at it and take notes if you like. You're not allowed to take any pictures of it, though, of course, because for the same reason as to why. So I just want to make it clear, as a right to know officer, I don't want to get a lot of requests for it. You don't have to do a right to know. You can ask to come in and see it and make an appointment, and we'll show it to you.
Just to clarify, so the document that Mr. Tate referenced and is available to the public is different than the document that we received as board members on that thumb drive, looking forward, talking about all, it's the same?
That's the same document.
Okay, thank you.
The board members had a choice of whether they wanted to see it. Wanted their copy on paper or on a thumb drive.
Okay. So on that note, again, we're going to kind of take a step back. We're going to review the master planning process, so that everybody's clear on what the process is, where we're at within the process, and what are the steps to go forward. So a facilities master plan sets strategic facility goals based on the district's goals and objectives, provides physical framework looking forward for the next 5 to 10 years. Formulates a plan to meet the long-term needs of students, teachers, administrators, parents, and the community. And it also aligns facilities with the district's comprehensive plan priorities, classroom, culture, and community. So within the master planning process, the first step is the strategic analysis, which was the demographic study, planning, building functional capacity analysis, which Schrader Group completed, and the functional capacity versus the future enrollment projections, which we reviewed at the last meeting. The next step is the facilities assessments, and these kind of steps that they kind of worked hand in hand. Was the district-wide building assessments, which Doug spoke about at the last meeting. CHA engineers came through and went into every nook and cranny, into every single building, to make sure that that document that we keep referring to was the most up-to-date information that we had. I think it hadn't been updated probably in 4 or 5 years, something like that.
In that capacity.
Yeah.
in that broad capacity. It is updated every year, but we wanted to make sure that we had the most up-to-date information in every nook and cranny of the buildings. So right now, we are currently in the concept options phase. The facilities committee meetings, we have facilities committee meetings to present data collection findings, which again started last month. We started talking about some of the data that we have collected. We had district-wide planning options development, which again, we discussed last meeting, and we're going to continue to discuss, and based on that, the spreadsheets that we have here. Review conceptual budget estimates, schedules, and financial planning. And then also develop actionable scenarios for the next 5 to 10 years. So as we discuss our options, if we come up with actionable scenarios, maybe someone has a different idea that we haven't discussed, we continue to discuss them in the planning phase. The final phase of this is the facilities master plan, presentation of final facilities master plan. Final plan includes detailed projects, budgets, and timelines. And it also leads into the final financial planning. So again, we are in the concept options phase. Like everybody said around the table, we do not have a finalized plan. That's what we are working on now. Okay, master planning options. We have maintain status quo. We have minimum intervention, and we have implement the master plan. So if we maintain status quo, we continue to complete $6 million in summer projects. Buildings and infrastructure deteriorate over time, leading to higher maintenance and repairs costs. I guess we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. Deferred maintenance accelerates depreciation, resulting in higher costs. And then we end up with reactive repairs resulting in higher costs. Some examples of these are North Boiler repair that we are currently working on. Richboro Middle School chiller. If you guys all recall, the chiller went down and we had to rent one for 2 summers at an extremely high cost. And then the Chancellor Center foundation water infiltration. So just to remind everybody what the Chancellor Center foundation water infiltration looks like, if you look at the picture on the left, we have water coming in and continue to come in, and that wall just continues to keep deteriorating. The more it deteriorates, the higher the cost it's going to be. This area here is the staff entrance steps over here. We have a temporary wall built. It's been built 2-3 years now.
Yes.
And you can see right here, there is some exposed rebar. The more rebar that gets exposed, the more it rusts, the more it expands and causes more wall to deteriorate. So these are costs that keep growing over time. Lastly, this picture here is the areaway outside of my office. You can see that the wall is cracking and bowing in. When you guys leave tonight, if you want to stick your head, it's right the areaway right over here. My fear is that eventually it's in my office when I come in. Hopefully, when I come in the morning and it's not when I'm here. But you can look at any of the areaways. This is probably one of the worst here because the wall just kind of bows in here. If you look at this above the steps, it's deteriorating. This is not due to lack of maintenance. This is major projects that need to be done. It's a building that's over 100 years old, and we need to be able to update that.
If you recall, a few months ago, Doug did a presentation on the Chancellor Center. These are the same slides that were presented then. Similar slides, similar to what was presented then.
Yeah, Doug had a billion more pictures than what's up here, if you guys remember.
That's available on our website, I believe.
Yes. The next option is the minimum intervention. Again, it continued to complete the $6 million in projects. We could potentially do some district realignment. There would be minimal cost, resolve overcrowding in elementary schools. But again, it would defer maintenance, which accelerates depreciation, resulting in higher costs ultimately. I think I've probably said it before that the cheapest time to do something is right now. Tomorrow, it's always going to be more expensive. So that's the minimum intervention option. Lastly is to implement the master plan that we're working on. We continue to maintain buildings at an established Council Rock standard. I think Mr. Hidalgo kind of touched on that a little bit earlier today too, about the standard that we keep our buildings at and the renovations. It offers significant long-term advantages, reduction in expensive emergency repairs, and extends the lifespan of the buildings. We do have some relatively older buildings. There's plenty of districts that have plenty of older buildings, but because we invest money into our buildings, we're able to maintain them, we're able to continue to renovate them, and it's not knocking buildings down and rebuilding, usually. High-quality buildings directly impact performance of staff and students. Students attending schools in a better condition with better thermal environments and noise levels outperform students in substandard buildings by several percentage points. But a negative to it is that implementing projects does have an increase in cost. I think once we move into this, you guys will see the increase in costs that I refer to, but there are benefits to it as well. Okay, and I'll hand it over to Tony for financial planning.
So I brought this slide back updated for the increase in, this is something that I presented last year regarding the our borrowing power. So power. If you look at the areas in red, that is our payments that we have to make on our current borrowings. And the area in blue is the amount that we're transferring into the debt service fund for future projects or for future borrowing. If you remember the slide that I put, which you probably don't, but the blue area is much bigger now because if you recall in the last budget or in this year's budget, we increased the amount going into the the debt service fund by 1% of a mil, 1% of our taxes. So you can see that the blue area is much bigger, and as time goes on with our current borrowings, the blue moves down, and the red moves down. The blue takes it over. So we're looking at by 2046, we have $5 million in debt service per year, and a lot more being put aside. That being said, that's just to give you a visual on how our debt service works and how, what we're looking at for our ability to borrow. We talk about a master plan. We want to talk about how we're going to pay for it. This is how we would pay for it. Obviously, we would have to, we don't have that kind of money in the general fund. We would have to use bond borrowings to implement any construction projects that we were to take on. Anybody have any questions on this before I move to the next slide?
When we do scenarios, could the chart how that line comes up? The red would fill in the blue, but maybe we'd use a different color for each project, kind of visualize it that way. In the future, I'm not asking you to do it now, but maybe it doesn't work, but that's an idea.
Well, I get what you're saying, and I think that's a great idea. I don't want to tie in projects. So I know they're giving us cost, but the cost. There's a big difference between there may be a big difference between what they say and what they do, and also to tie it into right now we have borrowing power, but we don't have a significant amount of borrowing power. Sure. But there are ways that we can increase our borrowing power without raising taxes. But I just want to the next.
I didn't want to throw you off. Go ahead, keep going.
So when we talk about financial planning, so I work with PFM, and we looked at where we are with our debt service payments, and this is a kind of like what they're going to talk about with the cost of buildings. This is kind of a rough estimate based on today's rates. If rates go down, those numbers are going to go up. If the rates stay the same, that's where we'll be, and if they go up, well, that would decrease. So we can't say that we have this. So this is, and I want to make sure this is a very complex process. This is an oversimplification of how this works. So right now, if we wanted to, we could go out and borrow $82.5 million for construction projects. In 2029, we have some significant debt that gets paid off as part of our debt service payments. So we would be able to borrow another $25 million in 2029. And just so you understand, a 1% tax increase results in an approximate increase of $34 million in funding. So for every 1% that taxes increase, right now it's about $34 million. And it might be a little bit more than that now, because when we first started talking about this, our taxes were, our real estate taxes were $170 million. Now it's close to 180. So it might be a little bit more, but and again, that's an oversimplification based on today's rate. All those numbers, however, when you talk about how we work, when you decide on a plan and what you would like to do, we would look at, a 5 or 10 year period of construction and plan to borrow enough to cover what we need to pay for in that year. So if we started a construction project in 2020, say we didn't do any construction between now and 2029, first project is in 2029, we wouldn't borrow any money in that period. In 2029, though, we would figure out what it would cost us for whatever project we start in 2029 and borrow that amount. The advantage to that, and that every year that we don't, that we move money into that savings fund, but we don't borrow against it, that money sits in the debt service fund, and we're able to do what's called a wraparound, which we, and has nothing to do with my name, which we are able to exceed our debt service in certain years because we have money in the debt service fund from other years that we didn't use. So that is an advantage to our ability to borrow more money. So we have that, and again, for every year that we don't borrow this, right now we're putting about $4 million into the debt service fund every year that we don't increase our borrowing. So and then we are able to use that to wrap around. And just to give you an example, so we talked about $82,500 is what we could borrow now. $82 million. If we talk about doing a wraparound, if we actually looked at that, the amount that becomes available in 2029, and considered the wraparound funds that we have now sitting in the debt service fund, we actually could borrow instead. Say we wanted to begin a project in 2026, and we wouldn't do this, but we began a project in 2026 and we wanted to borrow the whole amount, we would be able to borrow $117.5 million in 2026. So that's the kind of benefit you get from using the wraparound and doing things that way. And I just got this information from PFM after you had the slides, so I don't have them in the slides, but they're still just estimates, but just to give you some idea.
What was that figure again, please?
$117.5 million.
Thank you. Ms. Powell had a question.
Several. So first of all, point number 3, 1% tax increase, it's much less than 34 million. You're talking about having that over time, because 1% tax increase is not.
That gives us the ability to make, so when you look at what a 1% tax increase does, that gives us the ability to borrow money and pay the debt service on that over in each year. So a 1% tax increase this year says that we can borrow $34 million, means that we have the money to pay the debt service on that, not that we, so that, remember, that's over, we're borrowing at 30 years. So when you borrow at 30 years, that's what we need to pay in this year, taking into account that we have to structure our debt so that a lot of it's structured so that we don't pay a lot of principal up front. We pay it at the end when other debts are dropping off and everything's gone. So, and that's the way it's kind of like almost like a ladder where, you know, we do a new loan, but we're only paying interest and maybe $5,000 of principal in the first 5 years. And then we move the principal amount up as other debt falls off.
So that's per year, the 1% tax increase per year.
No, so if we did that in 1 year, we would increase our debt service transfer
So
by
if we do
that.
another 1% the following year, that would be another.
That would be
44.
68 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that carries forward for ever?
Yeah.
Okay. So the immediate borrowing capacity then is not 82.5, it's 117.5?
I'm bringing that to your attention as an idea. I would kind of stay at 82.5 right now. Just that it's possible for 117.5, but I'd start at 82.5, and we can talk about the specific projects and what needs to be done and where they fall. It might be wiser to say we would only borrow the 82 now or whatever in the first couple of years and save that 25 and not use the wraparound, save that for later for maybe a bigger project that might be coming later, as opposed to, you know, something that we can do with what we have right now. So I would start at 82.5, but keep in mind that we can go higher, but up to maybe 107.5.
But if we decide to say renovate something, right, it's not gonna be all the money up front.
No.
Okay, so we have to borrow, figure out how much we need to borrow every year
Yes.
and get to that level.
Yes, yes, which again gives us more wraparound ability now or later on. And so, you know, I would say, I'm trying to give you an idea of where it lies, but it is very complicated, and we would have to talk about what you wanted to do, and then, so I would say that would be another phase of this, is when you come up with something that you would want to do before you would make any, you know, what the plan is. Eventually, we would talk about bringing PFM in to give us a more concrete plan. But for purposes of your discussion now, we wanted to give you an idea of where you were at, but.
Yeah, but if, according to this, and
Yes.
according to the spreadsheet, there's a huge difference between the possible cost of like all these projects and our borrowing power. So we cannot just make one decision without thinking about the other, because we have to decide based on our borrowing power.
Well, I think the main point is, I mean, that is our borrowing power. So our borrowing power is the main, you know, you want to look at these other projects and consider, you know, we can do better than that, but you are going to, you know, depending on what you want to look at, you're looking at a 1% tax increase over each year over several years in order to afford what you want to do. But you know, I don't know that we have, you know, there's so many factors that go in there. This is the most objective and simple information that we can give you right now.
And that is a very, very helpful to me. Thank you.
Could you, just for the public, define TFM?
Oh, it's the company that we use we contract with for all of our bond borrowings. They do all the work that we're not able to do with the market and getting our information out there and getting us on the auction to auction off our bonds, and you know, and they help us plan for this, and they're pretty much in not every, but in a lot of school districts and a lot of municipalities. They work with a lot of them, and you know, one of the processes that we go through is we have to get a bond rating, and we have a pretty high bond rating, pretty much the highest we can get based on the size of our institution, and we maintain that every year with you know, good work of the business office and the rest of the district, and that with, you know, advice from PFM. So.
Thank you.
So that's what I have on our ability to borrow.
That's very helpful. Other questions, or do we want to move on?
I would say, is there, before we move on to CHA and Schrader, is there any questions about what we've just reviewed?
Just to clarify, Tony, $82 million represents what we could borrow.
Yeah.
We do have, or do we not have additional funds as your cash on hand in Jess's capital funding bucket?
No. The capital projects fund is pretty much, we have
Spoken for.
we've spent it, and we have to spend it down. We can't have extra money. If we have extra money, when projects are finished, we'd end up paying money back.
That's what I was trying to get you to explain. Thank you.
Right.
Um,
You have to explain that to publicly, to please clarify that.
Okay.
That has to be,
So-
that money has to be used.
Yes.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
So when we borrow money on a bond issue, we are legally required to use that money for what we say we're gonna use it for, which is construction. We have to be very careful. There are guidelines and rules as far as how much we have to spend in a certain amount of time. So that's one of the reasons why we don't borrow money until we need it. Because you don't want to borrow, $10 million and then construction doesn't start for 2 years because it sits in the bank earning interest, which you end up having to pay back to the federal government because they are tax-free bonds. So because there's no tax on the bonds, they don't want us to make money off the proceeds. They want us to use them for what they say they're for. And it's called arbitrage. Arbitrage, yeah.
MBA word.
And, yeah, and they, so we don't wanna, we have to use it that way. So any money that we use, if we say it's for construction, we have to use it for construction. We have to spend it in a certain amount of time or we get penalized. We can't earn, we can only earn so much interest or we get penalized. And and at the end, we need to be, so we finished this year, we finished Richboro, which was the last capital project as part of the last master plan. So because we finished there and we finished our borrowings, we had to end up with basically no money. And we're at the point now where you try to be so accurate that we're borrowing money from capital reserve. And I talked about this a couple months ago, that we're borrowing money from capital reserve to make the last payments because we have money in the capital projects fund that we can't spend because it's stuck in escrow with the townships or the boroughs where not the boroughs, but the townships where the construction took place. And we're working on closing them out as soon as we can. I think we're hoping to get 700,000 of that soon. Yeah.
I'm just curious, kind of for context, for myself and for the public, the 2029 payoff, what construction is that? Like, it's related to some kind of bond issue. Was that, I assume it's not Richboro, we're still gonna be paying for Richboro
Yes, it's
after
not Richboro.
2029. What are we,
How
long? I guess I'm trying to understand how long these.
Well, we've been borrowing for 30 years. So Richboro, what we just borrowed in 2024, $11 million for Richboro. That will not be paid off for 30 years.
Okay.
I do also want to make another point that could factor into our borrowing power is we do have bonds that are able to be refinanced. Of course, we wouldn't want to refinance them unless there was a financial advantage to them, but that would lower our debt service payments going out, which would increase our borrowing power. So we're keeping a very close eye on those bonds that we can refund and what interest rates are at compared to where interest rates are now. And as soon as it's advantageous for us to go out and refinance them, I believe we had it, but we never had to pull the trigger where we asked the board to give us permission that if we get into a situation where it's advantageous to refund a bond, that we have permission to refund that bond. So, I forgot to mention that.
On slide 15, under the minimum intervention, second bullet stated that district realignment, just clarification what you mean by the district realignment.
Yeah.
Realigning district lines.
Okay, So are we
Do you want me to say
talking?
the word?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Are you talking about enrollment? Are you talking about the word being redistricting? Is that
Yes.
what realignment means in our paperwork, documents? Okay. Thank you.
I think the difference is redistricting implied, what we did last time was redistricting
District.
was district-wide. Realignment would be on a much more selective basis, right? Is that correct, Dr. Senka?
Yeah, some people have referred to the spot redistricting. I know some districts do that annually or every 3 years. You know, and one of the places we've spent a lot of time talking about where we know that there's an issue is particularly Wrightstown Elementary. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions before we move on to CHA and Schrader? Okay, we're going to take a brief timeout so we can switch computers.
Yes. I like the bucket work. I know. I'm not gonna say anything.
If your computer start flashing, you might have to change the resolution to match mine.
Is it coming up okay on there?
No, it's good right now.
Okay. Let's try something real quick. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready to resume? We're live. Yes. Okay. We're going to resume this meeting of the Facilities Committee of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors. I want to make two notes. Linda Stone, School Board Director, has joined us, and the other is for those who aren't familiar with the format of committee meetings, we have public comment following presentations in the board discussion. We'll have public comment then. So I'll just turn it back to Ms. Binden.
Before we start, if anybody would like the handout of what we're going to be reviewing, there's a bunch of copies here. I can take one and pass it down.
Okay.
And it's on the screen.
And off to you, David.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So Doug and I will attempt to go through the information, the balance of the information tonight. Ms. Binda and Mr. Rapp did a great job of creating a platform to talk from. There have been many jokes about the size of the font on this document. You do need a magnifying glass. I will be zooming in and out as you go so you can see that that's how we'll handle this. We did have a challenge getting the amount of information we needed to get on an 11 by 17, and that's why you're seeing what you see. So bear with us, and we'll make sure that you can see it as it goes across the screen. A few starting points from the analysis that was provided last time, and the analysis to some extent is the why, but there are a few pieces of information in here that might help some of today's discussion. So first of all, Mr. Taylor provided these simplified facility assessment documents, which represent in many ways that giant book that you have. But a couple of pieces of information on here that are important. You can see that one of the parts of the analysis that he provided included a full renovation cost at the various buildings. And that number that was used was $250 a square foot. And then there was a 30% soft cost added to that. So renovations of a building, as Doug presented last time, include full systems renovation to bring a building essentially up to today's standards as if it were a new version of that building. So it's all of the systems being renovated for about $250 a square foot. And we've had to create some order of magnitude comparisons to try to simplify this analysis, even though it looks complicated. Hopefully by the end of this, you understand where all of this came from. There's another version of renovating a building that we call alterations. And alterations could be in the range of $350 a foot because they include the renovations described here, but they also include movement of walls, shifting of structure within a facility and things like that, so that parts of the building might be reconfigured in addition to the renovations. And you'll see that that number is used for at least one of the comparisons that we do here. The last number that we're going to share at some point along the way here is a new construction cost. We remember back in 2019, 2018, presenting new construction costs that were $250 to $275 a square foot for the building construction cost. And the unfortunate part of the last 7 years has been the increase in the very heavy escalation of project costs to the point where they're probably about $400 to $450 a square foot looking out. So when you see the new construction costs that we've used, we've been very conservative and used the $450 a square foot construction cost. It's probably a pretty alarming number to hear, but it's something that we have to put out there as kind of a starting point. And if you ever did a project, the hope would be that you could continue to pull numbers back and make them hopefully a little more reasonable, but that's the kind of number that we're seeing out there today. There are a series of renovations on this worksheet that Mr. Taylor presented that you will see again here tonight. Another part of the analysis was the enrollment projections that were presented last time. Just as a kind of a point of reference, if you really look at some of the heavier years within the grade structures, you see numbers like 901 students in sixth grade and 2728 across the sixth grade in the district. I'll zoom in just a little bit further. You see numbers like, let me see if I can find another one here, 980 students in 12th grade in 2031, 2032. So if you're looking at this from a very high-level order of magnitude discussion, it's reasonable to suggest that a grade level might be 1,000 students if you were to try to do some quick calculations in terms of what you want to look at in the future. And we could all make the argument that we see 500s, 700s, 800s here on this worksheet, but for the simplified discussion tonight, we're suggesting let's use 1,000 students per grade level. You guys can weave that as you see fit as time goes on here. But those are three pieces of information between the cost per square foot, the renovations, and the students per year per grade level that might help this discussion just a little bit more. And probably the last piece of information here were these capacity calculations that we shared last time. And without getting into the weeds with these, what you saw across the K to 6 capacity, and we try to keep elementary capacities at about 90% of total use of a building. When you looked across the buildings, while some had higher and some had lower, the average across your K to 6 program was about 97% total enrollment to capacity. And this is in the year 2034, 2035. So if you're looking out on the enrollment projections, that's where you may end up in 10 years. And again, we also had the discussion about to what level can you trust enrollment projections? Well, you can only really trust them out about 5 years, because those are the students that are being born today. Those are the students that you will see in kindergarten at that point in time. The middle schools, we like to program middle schools to be about 85% capacity. In that 2034 and 2035 year, the middle schools were going to run about 89% capacity, with Newtown being lesser full than Holland at that point in time. And again, those are the populations that are forecast to go to those two buildings. And I think as we did that kind of sniff test on the buildings, folks felt like this was a fairly accurate assessment of how buildings might be used at that point in time. And so the why here that we're looking at is, with your K to 6 structure today, the elementary schools are likely to exceed the recommended 90% functional capacity, and the middle schools are likely to operate eventually around that 85 to 90% capacity, but you're seeing years where it goes up and down, and one building in particular is getting used more heavily than the other. So those were the synopsis, or those are the synopsis of discussion points that we made last time, which leads us to this, because the other thing that we talked about was this chart. And this chart represented a series of options, or arrows in the quiver, for you to make some decisions about how you might be able to proceed as a school district to try to provide some relief at the elementary level and perhaps the middle school level. And the worksheet that we've built takes all of these headings and all of the options under each heading and tries to provide a cost for each of those in a very high-level order of magnitude. The numbers that we provided, last kind of caveat, and Doug will caveat a number of things after we've gone through the worksheet, or may do it as we go along, is that these are unescalated costs. So these are project costs as you would see them for a project that you might start today, which means you may be building it starting in 2026, 2027. Okay? Doesn't mean you're going to do this. It just means that's the kind of number that we had to throw in here. So the document that I have was built as an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to go to that document in a second here, but back to those numbers that I talked about earlier. The columns that we were using here for calculating included, in the renovation cost column, these $250 square foot numbers. And so what you'll find is we had to develop in this worksheet what we thought would be a building area to either renovate or build new, and I'll try to share with you how we got to those numbers. Those in the renovation form are multiplied by the $250 a square foot. And then further over in the worksheet, you get a total project cost, and then you get what Doug was showing on his worksheets, a 30% soft cost. For folks who are not aware of what a soft cost is, we call the construction costs the actual building construction and site construction costs. The soft costs include all of the fees, the permitting, and then all of the things that a building utilizes, and we say when you turn the building upside down and shake it, things fall out. Those fall under the soft costs. So it's not the bricks and sticks that we say, it's things like furniture, equipment, audio-visual, technology, all of those things that go into a building fall under that soft cost of 30%. Is that a reasonable way to speak about that?
And design, right, and construction.
All of the design, construction management, permitting, fees, all of those things that go along with a project like this. You will see that there are a series of notes on our worksheet over here. Maybe what we'll do as we go through these is maybe you can hit the notes and what they represented.
Good.
So that was the renovation column. There are a series of those options from that original yellow or orange worksheet, however you saw that color, that included new construction projects. And they included, so that's where we included this $450 a square foot number. So the square footage that we would have come up with in each of these cases is multiplied by that value. It is then carried over to this column that I'm circling right here. And then what we did, Doug's team and our team, we did our best to assess what a site cost might be for the various sites that you might be constructing on or the building types that you're constructing. So those numbers are then carried over to this column, that 30% applied, and you end up with a total project cost. There are a couple of anomaly numbers in here. You see a number of 800 here. I'll explain that as we go. And there's a $600 a square foot number here. I'll explain that as we go. So those are the primary building blocks behind this worksheet. Again, any project is going to vary based on what you build, what the program that you build in that building is, what the materials you use and the building systems that you use, the site that you build on, and so on. So the best that we could do was create this very generic worksheet that carried a cost per square foot times an appropriate square footage. Last part of this, before I get into these, we altered the location of what was a column into these rows slightly differently. We carried what we will call outstanding renovation projects because there were 4 schools that had not been hit by the prior renovation processes, and those are still carried. However, we pulled them to the top of the worksheet only because we want to represent that these are things that the district will be doing at some point in the near future. You will likely renovate Newtown, you will likely renovate Maureen Welsh and Council Rock North and South in no particular order. These are only shown in the order that they are because they are K-6, K-6, 9-12, 9-12. So don't anybody expect that that is because they appear in that order. We knew that one of the things that we presented last time and one of the things that you folks have talked about is the Wrightstown space issues. So again, not in a specific order, but it shows up here as one of the headings. Then we get into this middle school space issue. And there are a series of solutions for that you can use as some of your arrows in the quiver. The issue of Council Rock High School North and what you might do with that building. And again, we'll hit the various topics. What to do with Richboro Middle School. What's interesting about the Richboro Middle School project is it appears up in the middle school solutions as well. And so you'll see a couple of those that get carried through and repeated several times. The administration building, whether it is a Chancellor Center project or whether it is moved to another site, which was also represented on that worksheet. What to do with South Stadium. And then finally, the last comment that was included there was the Twining Ford Road properties and what to do with either the program that is on that site or the property as a whole. So that's the context of the worksheet. I'm going to go to the Excel file only so that I can start to move through these and keep the concepts on the left and carry right across the worksheet. And I would say stop me at any point. So under the renovation projects, I'll just simplify this to say that the numbers that you see here as you work your way across the worksheet are the numbers that Doug presented for each of these buildings last time. So if you correlated these back to those worksheets that Doug presented on January 2nd, you will see Newtown's number at 26, or just shy of 27. Maureen Welsh's at 31.5, and then the high school's at 120 and 123.5. Okay? So those are on the worksheet for your use. Wrightstown becomes an interesting one to talk about, of course. So the building itself, we went through the capacities of the building. I think we had some brief discussions about the septic capabilities of that site and other things that create challenges for adding to that building. And so you're in the situation that you're in with the building size that you're in. One of the solutions that's recommended, now I will not use that word recommended again. One of the solutions, or the arrows in the quiver that's shown on that worksheet, is this concept of realigning, and in this case realigning some of the population so that it ends up in other buildings. So obviously in that case there's no change and no dollar value associated with the building, so you have to start with this next one, which is what happens if you replace Wrightstown's population or building on the house tract. And so in this case, you would maintain the district as a K-6 district. You would build a new building on the house tract. One of the things that we talked about here was trying to build to a little closer to how you've been building your new elementary schools. Your elementary schools, with a few exceptions, are built in the 500 to 650 student range. So this would potentially be a new 600 student elementary school on that site, which, as you can imagine, with Wrightstown's capability and capacity, would be more than taken care of by a 600 student school. To simplify this, at the elementary school level, you are seeing somewhere in the range of 165 square feet per student. You'll see higher square footages for students on the smaller buildings, and lower square footages for students on the bigger buildings. And if you follow my logic, you still have to build a gym on a building for a building with 200 students, just like you do for one for 800 students. So that square footage gets spread out further with a larger building, and therefore it's a little bit less square feet per student. So it's reasonable to carry about 165 square feet per student for a 600 student building, which would suggest that you have a building somewhere in the neighborhood of 99 to 100,000 square feet at $450 a foot. And now you're following the logic that I was describing earlier, square footage times the dollars per square foot. We're suggesting that house tract, an elementary site project, meaning you don't have significant playing fields, you probably have a little less parking than you would for a middle school, particularly for a high school where students drive. But you're still building playgrounds. And so it's reasonable to assume that an elementary school site project could be in the neighborhood of $15 million. And so you add those together, you get this value of just shy of 60 million plus that 30%. So a new elementary school could potentially be in the neighborhood of $77 million. Now, we're at such an early stage here that it is very difficult to present numbers like that. It's really more reasonable to say it's a $70 to $80 million project. And so just know that we had to do something to try to do a comparison here. That's probably one of the last times that I'll provide that level of analysis and description of the columns. The next one would be 6th grade center on Richboro site. And again, I'm sorry, I skipped one here. So the next two concepts, constructing 6th grade centers either on house tract or a Richboro middle school site, now suggest that the district moves to a K-5 structure and students would migrate to a 6th grade center somewhere in the district. So it's one of the ideas that's been proposed as a potential solution. In both of these cases, it's new construction, and now 6th, 7th, and 8th grade If you pull sixth grade into a seventh and eighth grade program, or if you're getting sixth grade separated and it starts to become more like a seventh and eighth grade, you're going to see things potentially like more art programs, more music, more performing arts type programs, family consumer sciences, and technology education programs. So you'll see the beginnings of those in a sixth grade center building, so that cost per square foot goes up. You're also generally looking at larger gymnasiums and a few more spaces for physical education than you would in an elementary. And
Probably locker rooms too.
locker rooms and all of those things. And so that's where that 200 square feet per student comes from, that multiplication all the way across. Now what we did differently here was the sixth grade center on Howe's Tract. Now that it is a little bit more towards a middle school, you might see more parking, you might see more playing fields, and so the cost for the site work could be a little bit higher. And that's where those numbers generate themselves into something that could be as expensive as $143 million. But remember, you're building it for 1,000 students. That goes back to that worksheet that I showed you from the prior presentation. Why is the Howe's Tract less expensive than building on the Richboro Middle School site tract? Because on the Richboro tract, we would also have to demolish the existing Richboro Middle School to build that. So that's why there's an additional cost on that site, plus environmental remediation and things like that. Okay.
And some site roads and drives that are associated with Star Center that have to be reworked a bit as well.
All right. The next two are doing the same kind of thing, building on the Howe's Tract and building on the Richboro site. But instead what you've done here is you have built sixth grade into the middle school structure. And the district becomes K-5, means that you're releasing somewhere between 800, 900, maybe 1,000 students from those buildings, and therefore reducing the pressure on each of those elementary schools. And so what happens in this case is you are now building 3 6 to 8 buildings. So you have your 2 current middle schools, each with capacities somewhere in the neighborhood of 950 students. So this is just suggesting that you build one more at 1,000 students, which picks up that grade structure. But all 3 buildings at that point would be 6 to 8 buildings. They'd no longer be the 7 to 8 buildings that Newtown and Holland are. Okay? So again, it's that same 1,000 students, it's that 200 square feet per student of middle school, works its way across, and strangely, it ends up as a very similar set of costs, if not the same cost, to the sixth grade center concept. Are there any these notations on the side? Are there any?
You know, you've been touching
You've
on.
been hitting some of those?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so what's interesting is a couple of those end up obviously down in the middle school solutions and the Richboro solutions. So be ready to see a couple of these again. Okay, next is the middle school issues. Again, trying to provide relief at the middle school level. The second, third, fourth, and fifth are, I'll start with the second and third concepts here. The first one says convert space in the current middle schools. We mentioned last time that Newtown Middle School was built with 4 LGI spaces. They're the spaces that are halfway down the classroom corridors on each side and on each floor. Right now they're used as large group instruction spaces. They were built so that you could do some simple steel infill from the windows back to the overhang area, and that would allow you to actually fit those spaces out to provide you about 150 students more of capacity in the building. So what this is suggesting is if you did that, that would start to alleviate that pressure at the middle school level. In this case, what we've got is a total dollar per square foot of $800 a square feet because you're trying to build within an existing building. It's very small construction, so that cost per square foot would be much higher just because you're trying to do that little bit of infill and fit out. Reasonable?
Yes.
So there's a small incremental cost to that of about $3.2 million. You come across and add the soft costs, so it's probably $4.25 million-ish to do something like that. The other solution to the middle school challenge would be some additions. In this case, I think what we were suggesting was additions to Holland, and you add essentially at 150 students, that's about 6 classrooms. But at Holland, one of the things that everybody has mentioned is the challenge of the cafeteria, and certainly the challenge of that dining space absorbing additional students in the building. So the thought that we had, and this could certainly be solved in any number of ways, but if you did build out into the bus loop area, the current bus loop area, which used to be the entry to Holland Middle School, if you remember, you could expand somehow that cafeteria and dining space. And so we tried to capture that in a square footage here of about 5,000 extra square feet in the calculation to allow for the expansion at Holland Middle School. And the assumption as we got into this was that it was probably about $600 a square foot worth of addition. And because of the total square footage there, you might see a project that could be in the neighborhood of $12.5 million to add to Holland to create that solution for 150 students.
Are you taking questions as you go?
Sure.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm wondering about if there's a way, I'm just curious if this is a possibility, to do both the infill at Newtown Middle and the addition to Holland, and change the grade bands to 6 through 8. Without doing a new middle school, is there a way to increase the space at our current middle schools and to move the 6th graders up?
And again, we should probably both answer this one, but it is possible. You can continue to add to those, but all of your infrastructure needs to be increased in size, meaning the cafeteria, the gymnasium.
But that's inclusive in this cost, is $12 million, 12 and a half?
That's for about 150 students, unfortunately. No, you would need to add far more square footage to get 6th grade in. Far more square footage.
Okay, so I guess, I don't know if you're taking requests, but that's something that I've.
Another solution you'd like to see? Yep, happy to. Now that we've got this process set up, we can certainly make these adjustments quickly.
Thank you.
Yep.
But is it even space available there to do something like that?
They're tight. It's quite a bit of work to make that happen on those 2 sites. So we need to do more analysis.
I would say you're gonna expand the problem area and then fill it in, you're still gonna have the problem.
Yep. The last 2 are the same ones you saw before. They're the house track solution and the Richboro solution for 6th grade. Okay? So that's why those numbers are the same. Let's move to High School North. This is one of the other ones that appears as one of the future discussion points. The first of the solutions here is the renovation of the current building. That number will parallel the numbers that Doug shared with you last time. It's that $250 a square foot times the total building. But the conversation that evolved further from this was, do you renovate that building or do you build new? And of course, at least for the moment, there are 2 solutions to that. One is, and we started this conversation last time, building new on the current site. So and I think we actually pulled up the aerial in a discussion we had with administration, but you would build on the baseball fields, and then you would finish that building, move the students from north into that building, then demolish the old north, and then you would replace that with playing fields, parking, and things like that. So that's what this discussion is here. That's this row. And in that case, the suggestion is that it is a 1,900 student capacity building to satisfy the high school needs. It is about 200 square feet per student. And what's interesting is if you look at that, that's 380,000 square feet. And I'll just pop back real quickly to this worksheet, which shows that high school north and south are in the neighborhood of 370 to 380,000 square feet. So those two correlate. Multiply that by the dollars, multiply that times, add a more significant site cost, because that site cost not only has to include playing fields, it has to include remediation and demolition of the existing north. So the dollar value there that you see could approach something in the neighborhood of $260, $270 million.
Ms. Pelly?
So if we decide to renovate north, what happens to the students during the renovation? How would that work?
Yep.
So, so this cost, what we're talking about now, is building a new school behind it. If you were to renovate, then we'd have to put the dollar amounts in for a modular campus, essentially. So you'd be doing the phasing where you're taking pieces of the building and renovating, and it's not a simple process. It's doable, but it's,
And those costs are not included.
well, that,
They're not here.
They're not in this.
which do we have?
This
the-
is your renovation, your original renovation worksheet.
No,
So there's north.
that wouldn't include, that wouldn't include site cost or.
We would need
Yeah.
to know that.
I think you have notes on here that say on 10 and 11 that you have proposed construction of a new high school on the existing excludes, you have notes here. So
Right.
those are,
It would exclude what David talked about relative to moving the school, building a new school on that site. We'd have to do those sports, right, for multiple years. So the cost for busing those programs, music program, whatever, that's held on the athletic fields, and the fields would have to be relocated during that time. And it also includes us maintaining the existing track and synthetic turf field and tennis court area, and rebuilding the concrete bleachers only. So they're pretty tired, and work on those on an ongoing basis. But if you're gonna renovate the building, you have to take a good look at how you would phase it, where the modular campus would be, how many spaces would be displaced to do a piece of the building at a time, and, how we would work around those obstacles. Now, we've done it. We did, Upper Dublin High School with a 2-story modular campus of 20 to 30 classrooms, right? There was an elevator, there was everything you need to manage a school, and kids are moving back and forth between those spaces. But, we'd have to assign those costs and see what's what.
Ms. Khan?
And I guess continuing with that conversation with the renovating north, I know, having lived through renovation of an elementary school, which has far less students and that aren't transitioning to the extent that high school students are. Do we know how, and that was projected 3.5, but, finished in 3, which is great. Do you have any idea of what the renovation timeline for north would be, if it's, as you talk about the modular and all the moving parts?
Yeah, when you phase a project, it certainly adds to the timeline, so you're probably looking at a 3 to 4 year project.
Okay, so,
I know North Penn we're working on now, we're talking about a 5-year project at North Penn High School.
wow, okay, so you could have freshmen coming in that could never just have their entire high school career.
They won't know a different life other than renovations and.
That's all.
Okay, I mean, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just look at these costs and astounded. The $267 million is very high. I'm looking at the renovation here, though. It says renovate. Do you have to renovate for 2,800 kids? Could you do your renovation for 1,900? And essentially lop off a third of the building and not do anything with it?
So it's interesting, but the reason that capacity is written that way is because if you go back to the capacity worksheet, technically you have 2,800 students worth of capacity, but it's with every space in the building full, constant. So really what you're doing is you're renovating the 370,000 square feet of building. You're not necessarily renovating 2,800 students worth.
Well, okay, but if you go by students, do we have to renovate 370,000 square feet of building? Can you do it in such a way where you're only renovating, let's see what it says, that doesn't say, a third of it, 2/3 of that.
So what I would say is, we've assigned high dollar amounts to renovation costs. But when you do a project and we start to get a closer look, we start to say, okay, these are what we're gonna focus on, right? There are levels of renovation that happen within a building, right? There could be light renovations, there could be middle, medium renovations, and then there's heavy renovation. So as we start to look at a project, we may say, hey, that the natatorium and swimming pool is no renovation. So that area would come out of, we wouldn't, whatever that square footage is would come out of this cost. Right now, it's included in that cost. We may say the gymnasium, we're gonna paint it, we're gonna put some new lights in, we're not gonna do anything too crazy, so the cost per square foot in that space would come down. But then there's gonna be other areas where we're gonna say we're gonna take some partitions out, we're gonna renovate this area more heavily, that might be the 250 a square foot. The other area might be 100 a square foot. We have to take a look at how that looks. Is that possible to reduce that number? Yes. I don't know what it would be, because we'd have to really sit and program it with the principals and the admin and understand what the needs are.
Right, but as we go through this, and as we talk about the financing of all this, that's a question to me that has to get answered, because that's the biggest nut you're gonna, we're gonna get on. And that's, everything else is gonna be predicated on that or not. Either we don't do it and do other things, or we do this and then figure out what else we're not gonna do, So, and if there's anything to get that number down, like I said, that's the number that scares me, and I look at what's happening in those other districts. I mean, North Penn tried to get a referendum and it didn't happen. I see now, I just saw an article today in the paper about Central Bucks and their renovations and what the issues that they're gonna have. I mean, because the bottom line is, you can say, oh, we can just raise taxes 1% a year, but we already did it last year. We raised taxes an extra 0.5%, was it, Tony? 0.6 to pay for the debt service?
I think it was more than that.
Okay, and more than that. So like I said, we're going hitting the taxpayer with this.
It was 1% for,
Right, so a full 1% out of our 2.6 tax raise was strictly for buildings, which doesn't educate, which goes into, our job is to educate kids. We gotta have nice buildings, we have to have buildings that work. And the question that I always say too is, what are we putting in these buildings? I mean, do we have to go top of the line with all this stuff? It just seems like I said, we pay an exorbitant amount of money, and I'm concerned that we're getting into the real estate business as opposed to the education business.
Thank you. Well, I'll tie it into my question too, because maybe lowering the square footage per student is a way to manage the estimates anyway. Because that was my question, if I did the capacity of North at the 2,800 rate, and the square footage, it's 130 something, and I just want you to explain, probably why, but I don't know how that, since it's so much lower than 200.
I can
I'll figure
I can do that. I can answer that.
Yes.
Yeah. So the capacity in the way that it's calculated for those two buildings includes everything. It means your gymnasium's full, every single space is
Classrooms in
full.
the pool.
Pool.
Yeah, classrooms in the water.
Absolutely, it includes all of those. And the traditional methodology of calculating a high school is it's the 200 square feet-ish. We were, I'll say tested, but it worked, in Springfield, Delaware County, to build a building that was 185 square feet per student, and it worked. I believe they feel today like there are spaces that they would have built in differently.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, we could just change the number capacity of the current school.
Correct.
Just dividing that by 200 into the 30.
Is the more realistic way to look at that.
Okay, and that's good to look at what our real capacity is. Plus, we use a lot of it for, I guess I can say IT.
That building has IT in it, yeah. You're not.
But that's it. That's all I'm gonna, thank you. And so what I'm saying is, to maybe curb costs, you would say 200 is 200 square foot. I'm sorry, is that right? Yeah, square feet per student is a hard number. Can we lean it up, like he's saying?
You can lean these down.
Okay.
Yep, again, we had to use order of magnitude here just to give you a sense across the
Good,
board.
great. I mean, it's a good start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Those were a lot of little boxes to try to figure out how you might share with all of these conversations. House Tract is obviously just a new high school on that track. It does not have any costs in it for demo of the existing north. It assumes that something else happens with the north site. Richboro was your next topic in that worksheet. We don't have any numbers for selling property, which was one of the concepts on there, one of the boxes. So obviously that would become a minus in one of these categories. It's just, what is that worth? Another one was raising the building and keeping the property. And in this case, you demolished the existing Richboro Middle School. It has certainly served its purpose for allowing you the flexibility to renovate buildings unoccupied. The assumption here is that that would be about $2 million-ish to do the remediation plus the demolition, and the $600,000 you see here is what Mr. Taylor spoke about. We do need to still provide access to the other building on the site, so we'd have to do some modification to driveways and things like that. Richboro Middle School, constructing a 6th grade center on that site, is a carryover of the numbers you saw from up above as solutions to the middle school and also solutions to the elementary school, so that's why that jives. And then the same for the following, which is building the new middle school on that site and turning that into a K-6 or 6 to 8 structure for the school district. So before I go to the next couple, what you've seen here are solutions for the district that vary from keeping you as a K-6 to moving to K-5 with a 6th grade center and a 7-8 building to moving to that K-5 but doing 6-8 middle schools. So those are the 3 big picture solutions that are presented by all of these options so far. The last one under the Richboro Middle School conversation is the administrative center. If we converted part of that building to the administrative center, and what we need to do is go back to the worksheet that Doug prepared for Chancellor Center, which shows that the building uses about 35,000 square feet for the administrative group. And so if you went over to Richboro, you might renovate 35,000 square feet, which is what shows up in the column. And because it's no longer a classroom structure, it is being converted to office spaces and training spaces like you're in right now. The number that Doug's team and our team came up with for alteration was $350 a foot. That could go up or down, obviously. So that's the number there. Comes up with a grand total. There is a site cost associated with that because you will probably modify and work on parking. You also have a demolition. I think in this case, we talked about demolishing part of that structure. You remember that being the case?
Yes.
And then providing appropriate access to the sales center as well. So that's where that number comes from.
Ms. Khan?
Question regarding the last one, converting the Richboro Middle School to the administrative center. Does that final price, does that mean the administrative center would house all the administrative, like currently right now at the transfer center, we just have like Dr. Sanko's core team. So I know facilities is at another site, our Aramark third-party vendors are at the 24th. Would that allow for everyone to be under one roof?
This scenario does not. This is just taking this functions from this building and moving them there and then demolishing the rest of the building. Wouldn't.
Can I add that to the wish list?
You
Because
could add.
that might be able to eliminate.
It all at the same building.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to add there.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, Ms. Stone?
So when you're saying it takes what we utilize here, so it's considering all of these large training rooms and so on?
In that case, yes.
Which we may not need to have in a new area. We can always utilize one of the elementary schools or middle schools for meetings in the evenings.
This building houses a ton of training during the school year that can't be held at elementary schools because of the capacity or high schools or middle schools because they're using those areas during the day. So this building is, these 2 rooms and the board room, other than evening meetings that you guys attend, it is heavily, heavily occupied. We know because the parking too. We fight over parking, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is held in this building, and that's why we continued to keep the 35,000 square feet.
And following on Ms. Stone's question, would this new administrative center include a large meeting room such as across the hallway? Does that get used for training? It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just used once a month? Yeah. Okay.
No, it's probably used 2-3 times a week at least.
Okay.
You can hear the banging upstairs when you sit in the office. So.
It sounds like elephants in my office sometimes.
Mr. Roosevelt.
Thank you. As long as we've got a break, and I'm sensitive to that. I want to first commend Schrader and CHA for these numbers. This is, I don't think too many people around this table recognize, this is exceedingly daring to do this.
That's a good way.
Something that you really want to avoid for a long time. There's a possibility to distract and go off the weeds. So when he mentioned order of magnitude, that's a really, really good point regarding space, regarding cost that we need to look at. This is effectively a comparative tool. It's also a puzzle. One of the things, as long as we're asking for requests, could we have a property area and or a building envelope or remaining building envelope added to some of these buildings? For example, House Tract is listed up here for all sorts of different size buildings. And it would be, if you had a series of suitcases and had to put your clothes in it to put on a pack, to go on a trip, you wouldn't want to lightly pack your largest suitcase and then have to squeeze a whole bunch of other stuff into your carry-on and your medium-sized suitcase. So just for understanding, if House Track is large enough to house a high school, which is clearly our largest building and largest parking area, we probably wouldn't want to, ideally, initially, unless we had another plan to deal with it, put a middle school or an administrative building on it. I'm pretty sure Schrader and CHA recognize this, but I just sort of want to put that out. This is an interesting idea on how to deal with all this, and I really like this spreadsheet that you've done. I understand it. I think it's great having that understanding of how much available building space we have at, say, Holland Middle would be interesting. Figuring out with Wrightstown Elementary, the problem to a large extent is sewage. There isn't township sewage. Could we construct a larger sewage plant on there to deal with it? Maybe, maybe not. But as long as we're looking into these large order of magnitude ideas, that would be helpful to make sure that we put the right amount of luggage in the right suitcases. And I just also wanted to commend, once again, reiterate it, that they've combined with what Mr. Rapp did in the beginning of this meeting of sort of showing us what's available. This makes these numbers more relevant. It's very timely as sort of companion pieces. And this is normally something that an architect would not want to do this early in the process. But without this, this doesn't generate the conversation that we've had. So I really want to commend that and hope that everybody listening and sitting around the table doesn't get too lost into too many of these little details. Just keep them proportional. Is that consistent and accurate, Mr. Schrader?
Great encapsulation of the big picture. That's right.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. All right, for the recording. I guess we're just gonna throw the ideas out. So, middle school and putting 6th, 7th, and 8th, right? That's something that I really want to look into because it solves a lot of issues across the board as far as capacity at the middle and the elementary schools. The only thing I see disparage is, you know, the capacity at Newtown to handle, you know, an extra grade. So we have it up to 4 classrooms, I believe, right?
For the 150, it's 6 for the 150.
Okay.
Oh, you're suggesting the 4 that we can get out of the
That we can get out of the open
correct.
space. So, okay, but between that, I don't think we have to touch Hollow Middle School. We have to get this, you know, capacity down. And then maybe write an old direction that we had done before and look at a new building for Richboro Middle School, a new middle school, or I don't think we're gonna renovate that building. And I'm seeing in the chart, it says 1,000 students at a 140 million. I don't think we're gonna need 1,000 students in that building, so it's gonna be like pretty much the same size as it was before, maybe a little bit bigger, but I could be wrong with this, because, it's probably 1/3 of, so it might be close to 1,000, but I don't know if it's gonna be that high. So let's just say we do, and we're gonna bite the bullet there. When you add all the numbers with the other scenarios, that might not look too bad. So that's the third piece. And then what do you do with the administration? The renovation is, I think, $11 million or $8 million, is it? It's one of the cheapest things on here to renovate. That's Newtown Elementary School. Am I looking at the wrong one? What are we, I'm going to administration and looking at fully renovating is 11.4 million. That's an idea, but, so, that's something that would, one track that I think is a pretty solid, off the top of my head, type of way to go. I think it hits on almost everything.
Mr. Rapp, sorry.
I just want to, in relation to this building, we're talking about the uses of it. It also just want to not forget that the borough does use this building also for their meetings.
Thank you. Good. We still talking about the administration center?
We
didn't get there,
Yeah, Linda.
but that was a good segue, but.
Ms. Stone.
Now, regardless of what happens to this building, did we ever consider leasing for the 35,000 square feet? Administration, I have no idea.
So we've been working on trying to get information, and we did get one realtor who got back to us. Said we're looking at about $26 a square foot. So on a 30,000 square foot space, you're looking at a yearly rental of $780,000, $65,000 per month.
Can you say that again? 70?
So for $26 a square feet for a 30,000 square foot space, it would be about $780,000 a year or $65,000 per month.
But you have 3,500 square feet,
35,000. Yeah.
so it would be even more.
Yeah,
And we have to do some leasehold improvements.
Some of that's mechanical.
depending on the space, yes.
I have to back some of that out.
But not too much, it's office.
Well, it would depend on,
Yeah.
Less than a
And
million.
we wouldn't,
It's not all
wouldn't
that
have space for
there's,
rent.
there's other things you could do with a, I'm not saying this isn't an option, but you consider having, well, no, we would need the space for a drain, so.
We would have to.
We still talking about Richboro Middle?
No.
You go to
No, we're,
admin.
okay.
We're ready to go to admin,
Ready to go to admin. All right.
when you are.
I'll simplify the admin discussion a little bit, although I'm sure it'll get more complicated after,
Yeah,
but.
I'm gonna have to complicate it.
You want to complicate it first?
I can complicate it first, in that the fully renovated Chancellor Center is a number that we used from the capital improvement plan for comparison purposes. But if you fully renovate this building, there are gonna be some of the fix-it costs that are still associated with this. For example, going outside and taking care of the foundation, site work that's excluded. So there are other costs in addition to that to the 11.4 that would be added to this if you were to consider renovating this and maintaining.
Didn't we discuss 16 at one point?
It's probably closer to that.
Yes.
When you consider the exterior repairs and site costs.
So Doug, I'm sorry, clarify that because, so if we were to fully renovate Chancellor Center, the cost is not 11.4 million.
So fully renovate, as I said, there's a heavy renovation, there's a light renovation, there's a medium renovation cost, right? So I'm saying the 250 is heavy, but that doesn't mean, so when David talked about Richboro at 350 a square foot, that is because we know at Richboro, we're gonna come in and we're gonna take everything out of the interior of that. We're gonna have 4 walls or whatever, and we're basically going to reconfigure that building. The assumption is that you're not reconfiguring this building to that degree.
Yeah.
So you'll have some of those spaces that are within the walls of the 1800s building or the 1900s that you'll remove some of those partitions and put in some fixed offices and do all those things. That is all assumed as part of this cost, yes.
Okay, and then the water infiltration in the basement is
It's
assumed,
excluded.
so in order to
Because
do.
it's not a per square foot cost of equal comparison to other buildings.
Okay, so if we were to renovate this entire building and take care of all of the issues, the HVAC, the water infiltration, and upgrade some of the spaces in the, like the floors in the hallway.
That's all.
Reconfigure office space to be.
So there's a hybrid. So the HVAC system, the floor repairs would be part of that renovation cost because we would have the HVAC replacement as part of that square foot cost. The foundation outside would not be assumed as part of that square foot cost.
Okay, then we need to add an option that includes
Right.
everything that needs to be done in this building.
Yes, that's why I said I was going to complicate things.
Okay.
So we'll have to add that renovation plus that, so we understand it. But it was not an apples-to-apples comparison of what it costs to do the renovations of Richboro as compared to this, as to building new, if you throw that in. So that's why
Okay,
we're trying to be, equal across the board.
okay, so we do need to add that into here
We'll
then.
do that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, David, sorry.
The 35,000 that you're saying that utilize here, is that gonna accommodate, if we had a new space, aren't we moving additional people in? Do you have IT people that would have to come into the administrative area? Like they were at Richboro Middle School, where are they now?
They're at North, and all of IT is now in North. NOS knock.
So would they stay there, is that appropriate, or would you want them, would you need the space there and move them into?
I don't think we need the space there, I would.
So I think you would program this, I'm sorry, Mr. Rep. You would program this to be what you think is appropriate. Right now, to do a comparison to what you have here, we're just saying 35,000 feet. So that'll go up and down based on what you think you want there as a district.
Mr. Higbee?
This question, I guess, is for the three of you can answer. Functionality-wise, does the Chancellor Center now work for what the district needs it to work for?
I would say somewhat. We are at a limit for space right now. I'm not saying that we're, whether we would expand or not, but we are at a limit for space.
I mean, one of the things to consider as we talk about all these buildings, is it going to serve the purpose for which we're spending the money? If we're going to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars at Council Rock North, just to use it as an example, is it going to serve the purpose of housing the students that it needs to house and educate them properly? If we're going to spend $16 million on a Chancellor Center, is it actually going to work as a Chancellor Center, or is it still going to be the same Chancellor Center functionality-wise as it is now, which I hear that it does not work as an administrative center for what we would like out of an administrative center. So I have to weigh the $16 million of renovating this building or spending an extra $4 million and getting everything that I need out of the administration building, including extra space, more functionality, being able to hold classrooms, the same, I just want to make sure if we're spending money, I don't want to be throwing money away on something that's not going to be functional for the purpose that it's supposed to serve.
I guess we would have to have a plan to see what a renovation would look like and what it would do with the building. Also, I'm just going to put this out there, when you talk about this building, you do have, it is an old building, and it has, we know what the issues are now. We don't know what the issue might be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I'm just, a new construction, you know what it is. This building, we don't know what it is. I'm not saying that But just a factor that I'm making sure that you're aware of, that's all.
That's a good point, Ms. Polly, and then Mr. Gildato.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to finish the presentation for each section before we ask questions. But since we're already asking questions, what does it mean to fix the Chancellor Center? What do you include in this estimate?
So I don't have that entire list with me, but off the top of my head, we have water infiltration that starts somewhere around this area of the exterior, wraps around this side and returns along the windows of the boardroom. So basically you have to open up that area of earth, expose that wall down to the footing and see exactly how much repair is necessary. And then we have to develop some sort of drainage matrix system that we would put on those walls and foundation piping, and then find a way to take all that water that we collect to blue sky somewhere, right? And I don't know that we can simply discharge that onto the street. We'd have to find maybe on-site infiltration or something to collect it. That's a pretty sizable project. That, by the way, when you do that, there's a thing called an angle of repose. They have to take the earth back at such an angle or put forms in so people can go as deep as they need to go. It's going to disrupt the paving around this side of the building pretty heavily. And it'll affect those 4 areaways that Jess was talking about earlier, where we had the failure of those walls. So they would be reconstructed as a part of that as well. So those are some site costs that would be associated with what we'd have to do here. We know that the stone repointing is going to be an ongoing process, right? So we have the stone, we've done some major repointing, but every so often we're going to have to come back and perform a similar repointing process like you do in any historic building to maintain the building. There's a lot of wood that still has to be maintained. Some of that is pretty tired, dry rotted kind of, it's very open porous grain wood. It was primed and painted before, but some of that ornamental wood will have to be replaced eventually and continue to be painted. Because it's historic, we can't simply put aluminum on it here, right? There's sections of roof that have to be maintained, and I'm just thinking exterior-wise. Inside, the HVAC system was put in here when it was renovated in the early 2000s, and it's nearing the end of its useful life. It's often that the equipment's failing in certain areas of the building or uncomfortable. And they're built into the spaces where, in such a way that you can't simply take them out, you have to take them apart. And the new equipment's gonna have to be brought in sections and assembled within the rooms because there's really not a lot of space to get the equipment in and around the building. So those are some of the more, and the floors you can see are starting to, need some work. It's not a typical tongue and groove dimension that you go out and buy and replace. It's a custom cut millwork that would have to be produced to repair the floors in kind. So
I also want to highlight that this work cannot be done while this building's occupied. We would be moving this entire building into another location so that we could do the work, because the work that Doug was talking about with the exterior of the building, you can't access the building while we're doing that work. We'd be cutting off both drives, significant amount of parking, and it just wouldn't be okay for people to be in the
And this
building.
cost is not here of moving.
It is not.
the exterior things I talked about are not, because it wasn't an apples to apples comparison of what it would cost to renovate versus build the same square footage somewhere else versus, but we'll come up with a hybrid version that incorporates what absolutely needs to happen here along with the renovation.
Fixing Chancellor Center, which is the most economical of the I can see in this spreadsheet, it makes the building safe and continues to function as is. Yeah, we take care of some of the, maybe the wood or whatever, but we are not changing anything major inside the building, but the building will be safe and can be used as is, correct?
Yeah, the full renovations would include a fire protection system within the building, I'm certain, right? Because right now it's not fully sprinkled, but if you fully renovate the building and go for approvals through the borough, you're gonna have to provide that fire protection that doesn't exist today.
So when you fully renovate, you say you have to fully renovate plus do all these other things, so
Right.
this is gonna be a very, very large number.
It's gonna be in that 15 to $16 million range. I'll provide that, I'll work with David, we'll provide that hybrid number so that you have the complete cost minimally to what you would have.
Thank you.
Mr. Darden.
Thank you. Sticking on the Chancellor Center, the modifying the number, like, my first house was 100 years old, and I renovated that whole thing myself. I would never buy a house like that again. I'm happy I did, but I wouldn't want to do that again. But understand, even after we do a full renovation, you will continue to put money into an old, beautiful, you know, it's a national, or it's a local treasure. So hopefully, you know, but that changes what I was going to say as far as like renovation sounds good, because if I could, and this is what happened with Rolling Hills, I wish we would have just done new construction for another $2 million. When you're smaller, lower, relatively lower prices, I'd rather see new construction than larger ones. Larger, more expensive things, we're going to be hamstringed to renovate and not do it, unless we can see where other school districts can show us how that's done, has been done successfully, and it's something we can afford. So I'm thinking, look at for the administration, new construction added to, hopefully one of those three things will be a new construction. And if I'm going to say one of the most feasible ones, if it's not the 6th grade center and we're doing the middle school, then between one of those two, add that to that idea. But I would only ask Dr. Senko and the administration to just kind of, and I wouldn't mind taking some crayons and figuring it out, looking at the enrollment forms, figuring out how can we divide the enrollment for 6th, 7th, and 8th in 3 different locations with the 2 existing, with the addition to add to Newtown. And then how big do we really have to make Richboro? Because Richboro middle school was one of the smaller middle schools. So that / 6th grade center, I have a harder time with 6th grade center because it's just it's something new to me. And how you would get all the kids, to 1 or maybe 2, it would be fine. I'm just not sure I even want kids stuck for 1 year in one building. I really like the idea of 3 years in middle school, because I think middle school goes too fast. It's a good transition. I think 6th graders, when they're in 6th grade, are too old hanging out with kindergartners. So we can look at Neshaminy and some other schools that have really pushed down their middle schools, and that might give us fuel us in that direction. And as far as, I don't see on the list Chancellor Center, what happens to it if, let's say, we were to, convert the middle school to administration center. So it doesn't have to be part of it, but it's just not on the list. Like middle school, we either sell or we keep. And I'm guessing, raise the building and keep the land. We're not raising this building, I know that. But there might be an option there to give it away.
I think Ms. Stone and then Ms. Osten.
Whether we repair this building or totally renovate, what is the timeline for each of those projects? And then and as you said before, we cannot stay in this building even when we're repairing it. So we should include lease cost for those years that it's going to take to either repair or renovate.
Unless you go to the former Richboro Middle School, right? And use that as a temporary office, then it's found money. I'm speaking.
You still have to rent a chiller. We would still have to rent a chiller.
And potentially boilers, and potentially a roof.
But maybe the cost to do some of those minimal upgrades would be less than leasing it. This space would probably be, I'm going to say, any of these projects major projects are a year of design and approval.
Okay.
And then this project would probably be a year of renovation. So it would be displaced a full year, for sure. And again, this is this order of magnitude-ish kind of discussion, but yeah, it would be about a year for a building like this.
So we should consider somewhere close to an additional $1 million for leasing while we're not here. Moving costs and leasing. moving out and moving back and leasing.
Ms. Oseki?
If it goes beyond that, it would be more than 1 year. And it's not easy to lease for 1 year. The cost will go up.
Who's gonna lease you for 1 year?
Well, because most time they want you to lease for 5 years. So if you're gonna lease for 1 year, that
Lease
cost
for
will go
elementary,
up.
no, middle school.
What?
They will tell us.
That's all.
Ms. Oseki?
Okay.
Thank you, Linda.
So, I have a lot of things to say, but I'm gonna just, I think everybody knows that it is my preference to stay in Chancellor. It's a special building, it's historic, it's special, sets us apart as a district. I would love to have us be able to stay here. I've been upfront about that. My question is, we talked about this 7.6 to stay here, or to stay here and have it be safe. We would have to move out during that point, but the 11 million, that can be done over time, right? There's no, we have to move out twice. It's just one time, move out, fix the foundation, fix the HVAC. Everything else could be done over time.
The 11 million is basically, that is moving out and fully renovating the entire interior of the building. The fixed, either one of those you would have to move out to do.
So we couldn't do it over time. There's nothing that can be done over time, or it all has to be done up front.
Well, that's a tricky question.
I think HVAC and electrical are
You have
not
to.
something that you can do over
You can't,
time.
Well, and that foundation.
HVAC is gonna,
And foundation.
HVAC and foundation are gonna move you out of the building.
Mhm.
And they're like top of the list of things that you need to do.
That's the 7.6.
That's the 7.6, and the 11.4 is fully renovating, which includes the HVAC, and that you'd absolutely have to move out. So I don't know that there's any scenario with the extent of work that has to happen in here that you wouldn't have to relocate the staff for those projects.
And my other question is for Tony about grant money. We had looked into quite a bit of grant money from different organizations. Any updates on that?
And we're waiting for, if we want to, to hear back from the Senate, not the Senate, the Congressman's office about appropriations. Whether we would have a good chance of getting that or not is up in the air, but there's, we've applied for other, that's the main one that,
Right.
that we would be able, that hopefully, I would think we'd have the
Can
best
we
chance.
hold off on making a decision until we hear about the grant? When will we hear about the grant?
I have to get back in touch with him. I know he was gonna contact us, but we'd send him all the information he had asked for. So,
Mr. Hickey?
As a follow-up to the grants, it's my impression that the building would be more eligible for grants if it were owned by a municipality as opposed to a school district, or am I mistaken?
that was the indication that the Congressman's office gave us.
So in order to possibly renovate the building, it would be better off if the township was the owner as opposed to the district. And then that way you'd be able to keep building.
I would say they had a better chance of getting money. I don't know whether they would get enough money.
That could be a decision that the township could decide.
Okay, do you wanna, we're still talking about administration, so Mr. Schrader, you have other stuff there under the.
Yeah, there are various renovations. Just a reminder to everybody that district administrative buildings are still subject to this Act 34 requirement. The Act 34 requirement, without getting into it, makes it too difficult to add to an elementary, if you wish to add to an elementary. You would have to add to a middle or high school. I'll leave it at that. If anybody wants further explanation, we can go outside and talk for about an hour. But
You also can't build independent
you
buildings.
cannot build new either. Again, Act 34 requirements. So you're left with renovating existing buildings, adding to middle school, high school, possibly sixth grade center, or leasing, as you folks just mentioned. So those are the options districts are up against. That's why you see districts renovate elementary schools for administrative structures and so on, and add to middle schools and high schools when they build them. So that's what all of these are. One of these was Wrightstown, and in the case of Wrightstown, and I think you can understand that the Wrightstown scenario, you would have to move into a new elementary school on the Howes tract or Richboro tract or whatever you decided to do. And then you would renovate that portion of the Wrightstown building. That building is larger than 35,000 feet, but this is showing 35,000 feet worth of renovation of that to make it an administrative structure. And then the others are adding to either north, if you built new or renovated, adding to a sixth grade center if you built a new one, or adding to a middle school if you did that. So those are just those various solutions without digging into them too far. The last two categories, just real quickly, just so they're off the table. The South Stadium, there were two boxes under the South Stadium options. One was build all at once. Then the other ended up being.
One was gradual.
One was a gradual build.
Yeah.
And we eliminated that gradual build just because there's various infrastructures in place where you would just do it or not do it.
It's kind of been gradually built. To say we did build the synthetic turf field, we put the infrastructure in for the field houses for future phase 2 work. So some people have brought up the Penn Ridge athletic fields and doing it how they did it. That is what we did for them as well. We put the lights in, we put the field in, we put the infrastructure in, and then they later came and we put the bleachers in and we built the field houses and it was completed. What happens is as soon as you put the bleachers in, that assembly space is what it's considered, David, correct? It's required then to have the toilet rooms for all of the people that would attend an event. So that really triggers the need to put the field house in with the toilet rooms and to do the rest of the project. So we took the gradual build off since we already have phase 1 in place that we just put in, kind of complete the project.
And then just to wrap this up, and you guys can ask further questions on that stadium discussion if you like. The Twining Ford Road, the repairs came from the worksheets that Doug presented, so that's the first one. The second is if you relocated the administrative buildings, perhaps you would add, in this case, the 15,000 square feet that Twining Ford Road currently has to that administrative building, and then you'd sell this property. We don't have a sale price for it in this, so that would be a minus in this whole category. And then the last one as well, if you move the operations to a relocated administrative building and you kept Twining Ford Road. So these two are the same thing, we just have to come up with a number for sale of the Twining Ford Road property to subtract from the one.
Okay, if I may, I just wanted to interject. We do have those figures. We have appraisals for all these properties.
Yeah.
And those are publicly available, and I'll just add that they're sort of negligible in the context of the costs, so they don't offset a whole lot. But thank you for. Are you guys?
We are done.
All right. I'll open the floor, but I just wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Roosevelt said. It is daring to put out these cost figures. They're really ballpark and they're rough. We heard about all the things that aren't included in various, but for now I have a sense that building a new north would cost roughly twice what renovating would be. But then there's the inconvenience and so forth and so on. So, I mean, I think these numbers are really useful even though a whole lot of additional estimating needs to go in. I mean, these two firms did what we asked, and I think the figures are really helpful. And the other thing I was going to mention was we haven't discussed the educational questions that underlie a lot of these things. Like Mr. Hidalgo talked about the value of a 6th, 7th, 8th grade model for middle schools. Well, we haven't talked about how our administration feels educationally that would work. Or does the administration like the idea of a 6th grade standalone center? I mean, so it's even more complicated than all this, but I think it's really well done.
Can I just add one thing to that? Thank you, and that's helpful. The other thing to remember is once we do start to move from the order of magnitude numbers and we start to hone in on what options may be considered, we will certainly provide far more detailed cost estimates for your consideration when we narrow it down. To prepare that level of cost estimating for every one of these options at this stage would be a monumental task. But once we do get there, we will have all of the costs included that we consider as part of the project. So that will come down the road.
All right, floor's open, Mr. Love.
Thank you. Could you just, what was the title that restricts, the law that restricts new construction of administrative buildings?
Act 34.
34, okay. So if we renovate a recently new building and then a new elementary school and then build a new one, we're building a new school so that it's almost like, you know what I'm saying? You're building a brand new school, an elementary school, and then going to put the administration building there. You're still building new for the administration building, in the spirit of the whole thing, like the law. So Act 34 is probably there so we're not just wasting money on new construction for kids. But we're going to take a brand new school and that's already just been built and renovate it, so we're putting more money into new construction to make it worthy of an administrative building, and then we're going to build a brand new elementary school. So that doesn't, whether it flies or not, I just don't feel like that would be, if that's the.
So Act 34 is built around new construction only. And so because that was the driver back in the early 1970s to try to make sure that districts were not building things that's called the Taj Mahal Act on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want districts building Taj Mahals for their administrative groups. And so what happened was they built all of this around FDEs, full-time equivalents. A building of 35,000 square feet for kids is going to have a full-time equivalent, I'm just throwing a number out there, of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'll just say 500 is going to be the full-time equivalent. Gets multiplied by $1 value per FDE that's put out by the state every year. An administrative complex is going to have 35. And when you multiply that 35 or 45 or whatever the number is times that value, it doesn't give you the amount of square footage you need for a building for administration. That's the problem with the Act 34.
Isn't that state or federal?
State.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Quick, easy question. How much capacity of bleacher seats does North have? I see that the South one is listed at 3,000. I'm just interested for comparative purposes.
It's roughly around there.
Roughly similar.
I think no more than that. I'd have to check.
It's not much, Doug, because we went out, you and I were out there measuring the 16-inch spaces. And it's somewhere in that same neighborhood.
Yeah, it should be 18, you really want 18.
I think
18. But you really want 24, but the only 18 is supposed to work, right?
Mr. Higgs?
A couple questions, and to reiterate what everybody else says, thanks very much for doing all this. Like you said, this is a lot of work. A couple questions. One is, as I look here at the administration building, and it says here, convert the current Wrightstown building to administration center. Wrightstown was just built brand new, like within the last 7 years. Like, is there a reason why to convert that to an administration center would be so high? Like, I mean, it says here, almost $16 million for a building that's brand new just to renovate it to, I'm trying to look at options, like which ones I can discard right away, which ones we should pursue. I don't understand this.
That is a good point. That particular building, so you would have already have taken care of the HVAC, the electrical, without a doubt. You've got your windows and your roof taken care of. So this is going to come down to a refit, right? So you're going to move walls around, move ductwork and things like that. So that number could be, I'm going to say it could be lower, but you
Could be low. I mean, you're gonna have more standalone units for office spaces and things, but
it's built with single units
it
for
comes
each
down to-
classroom.
Yeah.
right. I mean, I've been to admin buildings in other districts where they've moved into an old school and you go down the hallway and a classroom is a giant office, right? Like,
Right.
so it depends. Are you gonna take out the classrooms and convert them to the type of offices you'd see if it were a admin building? Or are you going to just kind of move into the spaces as they exist? depending on what you do, yeah, it could be less expensive.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, because it's a brand new building. And then my other question, as it relates to the stadium, I'm a big proponent of the stadium, and I don't know if you looked anywhere else where it says, new construction, 6.5 million. I don't know if you looked, I know New Hope just constructed a new stadium, and I believe the cost was half of that. Is there any thought to trying to reduce that cost as it relates to the stadium? And then, you know, another thing, and Tracy mentioned in reference to the Chancellor Center, I know with the stadium that possibly, you know, we can do some fundraising and other things to dwindle that cost down even more. Like I said, I know New Hope got a particular donor to donate $750,000, and I believe the total project itself was under 2.5 million. So the cost to the district was, you know, $1.5 million for a brand new. We have the field there. We don't necessarily need 3,000 seat a stadium. You know, you could probably get away with, you know, 1,500 or whatever, and they don't have to be concrete. They could, you know, something else.
Yeah, you know, all of this comes down to, at the end of the day, meeting with the district and making sure we're providing you with what programmatically you're looking for. You said we only need 2,000 seats, and obviously the cost per seat would come down, the aluminum bleachers would be less, the cost would be less. We've also done field houses and public toilet rooms that are prefab. They actually produce they look just like a masonry facility, but they produce them off-site. The cost is less because you're not paying the prevailing wage to construct it on site. You put footings in, they come out in tractor trailers, they put them up, and they're already pre-plumbed, they're ready to go. So there's cost savings associated with different types of construction. There's things we can do. We're trying to give you order of magnitude worst case scenario. Last thing I want to do is say it's 3 million and it's 6 million. And say, Doug, you blew this by 100%. Like what? Right. I don't want to be in that position either. So
I would just also caution, many times what's reported is what we say in a meeting, and we may be talking about a construction cost. And I just want to make sure that it is, I don't remember the project exactly, although I remember the donor conversation. So we would want to check and see if it includes the project-related 30%.
Because this is the project cost. This is the documentation, the approvals, the construction, and the closeout, all the professionals, everyone included and done. So the actual construction cost is less, and this also includes the cost to extend the internal drive out to, I believe it's Holland Road, a gated entry, PennDOT, connections, so they could have a gated second means of egress from the site that you would need when you had big events there, especially if you had a football field with all those cars on a Friday night. So
I'll say of all of the things we presented, though, this is the easier one for us to build a real budget around.
Right.
So we probably could do that for you, so you have it.
Ms. Polly?
Yeah, so we have 4 schools listed, and we only had discussion about North. Do we know, can you remind us when these schools were built? And also I heard that maybe Churchville needs to be renovated, and it was not in this list, so can we talk about when they were?
Here are your construction years.
Yeah, and how
2002
quickly they need to be renovated? Can we wait like 5 years, or we have to do it right away?
So there are your
North
construction.
is 1970.
Yeah.
Okay, south is 2000, so it's not that immediate need for south.
South was renovated in around the same time as North. Gilbert did South and then performed renovations at North. So North was partially renovated, not entirely. There's still infrastructure that's in place from 1970 that wasn't replaced. The building wasn't fully sprinklered. There were a lot of different things between those two buildings. South renovations will be less because the building has appropriately sized corridors, the spaces are all appropriately sized. That is a building where you're going in and you're painting, you're doing finishes. It's not to the same level as a North. It's just not an efficient building. North was built in the 70s. It wasn't built to the standards of today.
So when do you think
lost
North,
in that building.
when does North need to be renovated? I mean, we have to do it is it urgent, or it can be done in 5 years?
I'm sorry.
North, how quickly do we have to renovate?
I don't know that there's, that it's an urgent, you have to do it now. There's certain projects that we would talk about, how far do we defer maintenance and renovations, not knowing if something's coming or not. So we have to be careful about that, right? So if you get to an area that there's a roof replacement, you're probably gonna do it. Are we gonna put a 30-year roof on it? I'm not sure. We'd have to talk now. Do we want to save cost on that because we may be doing something later? So we just have to be diligent about how we manage, the repairs to that project, as we go forward.
And there's Welsh and Newtown's years, 2000 and 1994.
So is it the same there? You say it's not urgent, but we have to.
Well, the stuff that's going to start tiring at those buildings are the HVAC systems, first and foremost. You used to have equipment, old cast iron boilers and things that lasted for 50, 60 years, and it was amazing. But the systems today are a little different, 20, 25 years, and they're getting ready for replacement. They're just full of a lot more components than they used to be constructed of. A lot of electronics, a lot of things that are different.
And that's why South is gonna come up soon, because you hit your 20, 25 years and major components start to break down.
That's what we're gonna see at South.
Yeah. And I mean, just a roof replacement was millions of dollars, and we're gonna get to the point where in the next few years.
That's coming up, right?
Yeah, we have to talk about how are we gonna do millions of dollars worth of roof replacement? If we renovate, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but if we renovate, then we include that in there. If we know that in the next 6 years,
Right.
then we say, okay, well, maybe we'll just piecemeal part of this roof until we do the full major renovation. If not, then we do a full roof replacement over the course of 2 years. And that's also why, if you guys remember at the last meeting, when Doug was talking about those summer projects, we blanked off what the next 4 years after this year looks like based on what we do here so that we can make educated decisions. Newtown Elementary is a good one. If we decide that we're not going to do Newtown Elementary for another 5 years, then we're going to have to do a roof replacement in 2 years. So that's why we pushed off what those decisions are so that we can make these decisions.
So to carry on with that, because that's a good start, is the need analysis of, you said you have a 4-year summer program, right? So we understand what you're kind of going after for that.
It's a 5-year plan, yeah.
It's a 5-year plan for that, right? I think that's gonna need to take into consideration. The need analysis, we've got 4 schools here, kind of what she said is, does South have to be done? What are the needs out of that South that we could look at that says, yeah, we need to get these done. And we understand doing a full renovation. However, if these are the top schools that we need to get, what are the needs though, instead of doing a full roof renovation?
If you want to flip back to the spreadsheet.
And I agree. So those are the things we can start to talk about. Even though this is a master plan for facility improvement and this 5-year plan is a capital improvement plan to maintain systems and finishes and components. So if South, for example, is a project that we know is going to be pushed out 10 years, 15 years, then we have to look at the 5-year plan and say, okay, let's start incorporating HVAC replacement as part of that project. And when you get to that project, you can renovate a building noting that those systems were replaced and they're not going to be included as part of that renovation. So that $250 square foot number now comes down to $200 or $175. So we have to carefully manage all of this, which is why, as Jess said, we didn't put any projects in for the next 4 years of the 5-year plan until we've had these master planning discussions. They're great questions.
And then the other thing would be is with full day kindergarten, and we've got the updated right now enrollment. We know about Wrightstown. We know some of our capacity issues. How much space do we have left? And we have to think about that coming in for what we want to do throughout for these elementary schools.
Yeah, you're right. we know we've talked a lot about the Wrightstown situation, and, we need to consider in all of this, and Doug and David have given us some things with Wrightstown, but we have not had a permanent fix there. And so as we go through this, back to Mr. Tate's point, I think connected to this is the educational conversation, the educational part of this.
Yeah, I have, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, quickly, connected to the educational piece, I want to talk about planning with the idea of a kindergarten center versus sixth grade center versus the sixth, seventh, and eighth middle school. That would be interesting just from an educational point. I know we're not getting into it now, but as long as the conversation. And from a building and planning standpoint, Mr. Schrader, Act 34, are we able as a district to build a new administrative building on an existing, but it would be separate, so it's not connected, just on the same property as an existing school? For example, North and/or Newtown Middle. Does that get away from that, or are we?
In the days when we had to go through reviews, it had to be physically connected to it.
For it to work or for it to not work?
For it to work.
For it to work?
Yes.
Okay. Physically connected by interior space, or would an awning work for it?
Well,
No, that's true.
no PE reviews, there are other ways to talk about it. You could do a glass connector or just a simple walkway or something.
Right, okay. All right, interesting. Thank you.
So, I have a couple of small specific questions and then sort of a bigger picture that builds on what Ms. Pally was talking about, because I think the priorities are really going to be a big challenge for the board, deciding which comes first and so forth. As Dr. Sanko talked about, the cabinet has worked on the if-then scenario. That's really going to be tough. But really technical, specific questions. Would the south renovation require relocation? And is the Richboro Middle School structure really worth renovating? So that's two questions.
The first question, yes, if we renovate south, it's going to be a building where we're going to have to have some modular classrooms and the ability to move kids in and out so we can take over second wings and do those efficiently. Now, if it's summer projects where we're talking about HVAC modifications and things, then we'll address those like we would any other summer project. But if we're going to do a full renovation of south, and again, I think south is a lot easier to renovate than north. It's a building that is very from a design standpoint, it was designed to meet current standards. So it's still going to require likely 2 years of work and modulars to move kids in and out of.
Okay. And then Richboro Middle, the structure?
I don't think that Richboro Middle School is, I don't know that it's worthy of renovating. I mean, the entire building renovation, I think it works well if you want to take the district office and use a portion of it, take the rest of it down. But the auditorium that's there, the ADA, issues in that auditorium would be impossible to accomplish with the design that it is today. It's definitely served its time. It's been good to the district, but I don't think that it's worthy of.
We have the spreadsheet up too with you.
Holland Middle School was one that was built in the 70s that was, you could tell it had a good skeleton. It was absolutely worth. You knew you could go inside, and there were a lot of movable partitions. You could take them out, and we were able to go in there with David's team and renovate that building, in a way that anything we needed to do from a partition standpoint we could do because of the structure. But Richboro doesn't lend itself to that same ability.
And
Yeah, there's not much with it that isn't tied.
Yeah, Joe's been asking and then.
Just thank you. Just real quick,
Yeah.
where the building capacity lists are, do we have, I know we have it somewhere, but could I just get a a list emailed to me later. If you know what aren't the middle schools supposed to be kind of equal, around
They're pretty close.
990?
Yep, they're pretty close.
Okay, that's all I really need.
Yeah, the programs for those two buildings are almost exact.
Okay,
We had a collaboration with Schrader and Breslin. We sat in this room and we designed those together, so it was a great effort.
And just a clarification of this shows Holland 968, Newtown 990. They were designed with the same quantity of rooms. The difference is how they might be using one or two rooms for learning support or some other type of program. That's why you see a differential.
so that we're gonna get, is that gonna be posted or is that something I get emailed?
Well, this was in the last presentation.
Yeah, you have it.
Right, that wasn't emailed though. Is that gonna get posted to the website? It was emailed, okay. Thanks.
You alluded to cost of, you said, the selling prices or approximate of some buildings. Did you say that we have those?
We have,
Sale price.
A
We
sale
have-
price
we have-
of approximate, it's not
appraisal prices,
appraisal prices.
they're like a year old now, but, you know, they're, you know, the most valuable one would be the Richboro Middle School property, which would be $2.6 million. I believe this in 24, we're pretty close to
Okay.
700 to 900 somewhere, 900,000.
For what
For 24 in this property,
are the 900s?
about 900,000.
And House Track is a property,
We did not have to get an assessment on an appraisal on house tracks.
And we had an appraisal on this property.
Yes. This property, 24 and Richboro Middle.
We've sent those appraisal numbers out to the
Yes.
board before, we can send them out again.
Yeah. There's a second.
Okay, I have a number of questions. So thank you for this. This was a lot of work and I can't imagine putting all this together, so thank you. And now that we're gonna kind of dig into it, for me, and probably for most of us, you know, we're concerned about the schools, or my first concern is safety, and my second concern is those schools that are overcrowded. And I think probably most of us would like to try to resolve all those issues without having to redistrict or realign or whatever the word was. I'm interested to hear from your team, Dr. Sanko, about, or maybe a recommendation about what do they think about the 6th through 8th? I hope that we can have that information quickly, like maybe at the next education committee meeting, we could talk about that, because we can't move forward really without knowing what the admin thinks about that.
So what I would say to that is that that's a tightrope walk, right? So the recommendation I would make to the board and to the community is to pay as close attention to these permutations that Doug and Dave put out to us. And our administration would recommend that we do something, and this where it gets to be a tightrope, we do something that has an immediate impact on students. An example is Wrightstown, but also has the foresight to project into the future to take care of Council Rock 5, 8, 10, 12 years into the future. And I think that that's where it gets difficult to try to forecast and prognosticate what the future looks like.
I wonder, Mr. Hickey had brought up this idea, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago about just moving Wrightstown 6th graders up to the middle school, to Newtown Middle. And I wonder if there's a way to do that as kind of like a trial balloon, a pilot program, and solve the immediate space concern at Wrightstown and try it out, see how it goes, see what kind of issues we have, having those grades grouped together. So I mean, we have to deal with the space issues urgently, and this is a 5 to 10 year plan. We can't be waiting around for that. And then Mr. Hidalgo had, and I think I agree with him, about adding a third middle school, that might be an option. But I'm concerned, and I think this is something that everybody is aware of, that like, where would those kids come from and where would they go? You know, what elementary schools would they feed from, and then what high school would they go to? And are we gonna put kids together who are then gonna be separated in high school? Because that's hard. Not ideal. So I think those are kind of some questions that I have at this point.
No, I think he had his hand up first.
You know, just when you said that, the issue that was with, and I'm a hospital solution as you want to think outside the box. The problem with the 3 middle schools is the way that they're configured now, if you make them even, then when those kids get out of 8th grade, you're splitting them. And that was a whole big issue that I fought almost 10 years for to try to rectify. However, now this would be really thinking outside the box, and I don't know how you would do it. Have 4 middle schools. 2 south feeding, 2 north feeding. Like, who says that Newtown Elementary School has to be Newtown Elementary School? Maybe it could be the Ed Tate Middle School. You know, or something like that. And if you had 4, it also opens up the possibility of putting a 6th grade in there. And have 6th, 7th, and 8th. You have 4 middle schools, 2 south feeding, 2 north. I don't know how that would work or look like. And like I said, I'm not trying to make the administration spend all this time doing some crazy stuff, but if you're gonna think of things like that, you know, why not?
Rick Abrams in middle school. I think Rick lives in that neighborhood. Ms. Polly.
Are you first?
Yes, sorry, I was thinking about what Mr. Hickey was stating. Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard some great things at the discussion tonight. I know for me, you know, we're talking about, even Ms. Oseki brought up the question about Wrightstown Elementary. I know for me, priority-wise, you know, Wrightstown Elementary School, it's something we've been talking about for basically since it opened. The crowding at Howland Middle School, overcrowding, or kind of at capacity now and then into the future. Council Rock North, it's a big project, so I feel like we need to start planning and for it now, financially and in the long term, which project. I do really like the idea of not a 6th grade center. I don't love that idea, but I do like the idea of moving the 6th grade students to middle school of 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I don't know numbers-wise what that means in terms of if a 3rd middle school comes into play, will the 3rd middle school accommodate the numbers that allows the 6th grade from all of the current middle school, you know, and using the demographic study? Would that be enough space? And then also kind of looking at the trend too, because we talked about as the Cropper study in 10 years, we had a big number at some point in the middle school and then again in high school. I know that we've talked about education committee over the past year, the elementary schools that have piloted departmentalizing, because as it currently is now, sixth grade elementary students are very different from the K-5 model educationally. They don't follow the Horizons and Wonders English Language Arts program that K-5 uses. They do not use the Bridges program that K-5 uses. And I know I believe there's talk about expanding the piloting program for departmentalizing 6th grade. So if we continue expanding that program and then phase in, because we know this is going to be 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road of potentially building a middle school, if that's an option, would we be able to do that potentially piloting Wrightstown into the middle school at Newtown Middle? Maybe there's other options for us to try to pilot other elementary schools into Newtown Middle as well, if spacing works. Again, there's other things we have to figure out. And then I think working from that, this is for me personally, just kind of thinking through all of the giant binder that I did ask Schrader and Dewey, thank you for providing it, just because I was literally having all the papers and Post-it notes trying to, as Mr. Roosevelt had stated earlier, it's a puzzle piece, right? Trying to figure out where all the pieces work. If we can think about, lost my train of thought for a second. all right, let me just circle back. The CIP projects that we talked about, like roughly going through the order of relevance of priority, I mean, of 0 to 10, of 10 being like it's completely dangerous, there shouldn't be students or anyone in that building. Thankfully, we have nothing like that. I know at North, there's a pretty big one, which is number 7. It talks about the natatorium, the desert air dehumidification, but that was already taken care of.
Doing that this summer.
This summer, correct. And then I kind of counted through North, the number of items that are in the 6 and 5 range, which, are not critical, but definitely need to be addressed within the next few years. I mean, I counted the 2 together, we're talking over 60 items that are on that list, and it's, in our pamphlet here, it's 3 pages long, that's of the 11 by 17. And the total estimate on that is $60,544,322. So when we're thinking about a renovating of North at 120 or 30, or a rebuild at double that price, obviously that's a big number to consider when we're thinking of this from the overall picture. I'll stop there, just because I know we're just discussing at this point, but.
Am I next?
Yeah, please.
So, I agree, we have to renovate what we need to renovate, because otherwise the roof is gonna collapse or whatever. And I hear like the building a new middle school and adding maybe Wrightstown next to it, and when I look at the numbers, these are like $140+ million each. So these are like huge numbers. And when I look at the demographics, it seems like other than Wrightstown, our elementary schools, they are fine. They don't need more, right? Our middle schools,
Holland does have.
well, it's not over 100%, and maybe you set a couple of options that they're not gonna cost as much, either through middle school, Newtown or Holland, to increase capacity, right? So to me, the 2 issues are, and the high schools, they do renovation, but they have capacity. So the primary issue is Wrightstown, and which has a huge, and the administration. Where are we going to do with that? And I'm going to say the words that probably nobody wants to say is, whoever did the redistricting, how many years ago and built that school, did not plan well for the future. And now we have to pay for it. But are we going to pay $140 million+ because somebody made a mistake? Should we do spot redistricting and make sure we don't spend all this money just for the issue at Wrightstown? Because I cannot tell our taxpayers that we cannot do spot redistricting and they have to pay over $140 million just to take care of something that was not done properly in the past. So I would really like to find out how that could work, how a spot redistricting could work, so that we don't spend so much money trying to solve the issue by building new and moving things around. I want us to do the right thing, but not spend money that we don't have to spend. Because this is a lot of money we're talking about. Even the 1% per year is only $34 million down the road. It's nothing looking at these numbers. So I would put the financing at the front, the educational part second, and then we can talk about everything else that we want to talk about.
I think that's really well put. There were 2 things I wanted to talk about. One is phasing priorities, and the other is realignment. I mean, clearly, one of the most immediate concerns we have to address is Wrightstown.
Right.
And this district has not been in the practice of spot redistricting or realignment. And if that's a solution, then I think we really need to take a hard look at it, as opposed to spending a lot of money on buildings that, you know, we have to balance a whole lot of projects. And if realignment is a partial solution, then I think we ought to take a hard look at it, even though it's not been the way Council Rock has operated in the past. Because other districts do spot redistricting and they don't fall apart. You know, I don't know, is that a discussion that ought to be an education committee or is?
Yeah, we
You
can certainly do that. We were in touch last year with Cropper, looking at that, drilling down, and I think we even spoke about it at the Education Committee meeting, drilling down into the number of houses in specific areas and the number of children and ages in those houses.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with what Ms. Colley was saying, and I want to also add that I'm not, you know, unaware that spot redistricting can be difficult on families in certain situations. That's a reality of and that's why Council Rock has tried to avoid doing that in the past. So I'm not heartless when it comes to that. But the bigger thing, and Ms. Pally talked about this too, is I think we have to start working on priorities and level of urgency. Wrightstown being right at the top, I think everybody agrees, maybe not. That's my assumption. And the other decision that we have postponed, I won't talk about kicking a can down the road, but we've postponed dealing with Chancellor Center for a number of years. It was on the summer projects list, was it, Mr. Taylor, 2 years ago? There was a solid proposal in the range of $6 million to do HVAC work and some of the other stuff. And the board at that time decided to postpone a decision. And that was 2 years ago. So whatever we decide in the coming year with Chancellor Center, it's not going to become a reality for several years after that. So in my personal opinion, the two top priorities in terms of level of urgency are Chancellor Center and Wrightstown. And I'm interested in discussing, you know, whether or not there's a feeling that no, right up on the top of the list ought to be Council Rock North, or is Newtown Elementary School really in dire need of renovation? It ought to be high on the list. So I'm interested in opinions about priority from our experts.
I would just like to say about this building is, and I know it's been talked about in public, that administration is not talking about any big Taj Mahal administration building in any way, shape, or form. Everything that we've ever done or talked about or discussed was the most cost-efficient way possible to do that. And I would just say that one of the things that we've talked about is the building having problems and worried about at some point it get to the point where we have to do something immediately. And that's not anything that we can predict. We can say that the chances of that happening increase every day we don't do something. But you know, I'm not, you know, that's just what I'm saying about this building, and that's, you know, and what administration's talked about, and administration has just tried, from a cost standpoint for this building, has just tried to provide, and in this, options, and that's no endorsement of any specific option.
Understood. Thank you.
I just thought of something that I thought, because I'm running through, trying to run some scenarios, right? And talking again about the bigger project of middle schools, you know, the third middle school. And I thought, okay, so once you figure out capacities, then the problem becomes you don't want kids from 2 middle schools going to, you know, a different high school than the kids in the middle school. So then I thought, okay, so you build the schools the way that you think they need to be built, and then you do one redistricting to make things exactly how they're supposed to be, based off of that. Because the only way you're gonna fix, instead of splitting kids up, is you're gonna have to look at the neighborhoods and say, this is how the new district's gonna work based on these 3 schools. Because I really think it is a big endeavor. I think we can get the prices down from 140 some million. We probably get the admin building in there with that. It's a big thing, but I think we have capacity issues a lot. I'd like to have more room. So all I thought was, as part of this plan was, we're probably gonna have to, and everybody would agree, if we're gonna spend all this money on construction for the kids, that we're gonna have to, you know, realign the school, just make it something that really bulletproof, so you don't have to do this again in the next 10 years. Yeah. Not an easy task.
And I would just say to that, you know, another way to look at it, and as you've heard me reference here, we administratively have tried to play every scenario out over and over again. Another way to look at that is to realign ascending schools. So if you were to build another middle school, then you divide based on your elementary population. Unlike what we lived through with Richboro Middle in the past, where kids were split, some chose north, some chose south. We have 10 elementary schools, and maybe it's a 3-3-4 split, or, you know, a 5-2-3 split, or whatever the population would warrant. So we've looked at that. We've looked at the Richboro Middle School that you just heard Doug say he thinks that the building's tired. Even with that, with a 6th grade center, our current enrollment as of February 1st is around 818 6th grade students. That current building, if everything was up to date and worked as it should, that number of students would not fit in that building. And that's one of the reasons it was never used as a swing school for Sulphine-Stone. And then, you know, you start thinking about, when you were talking to Doug about the questions, and David about the questions about the high schools. It's like we couldn't even pull Council Rock North, which is the smaller of the 2 high schools, and plug that population into Richboro Middle School. So there are a lot of permutations. There are, you know, I said to Tony and Jess before the meeting, I think we'll walk out of here with more questions than answers, just given the scope of what David and his team has done and what we have done administratively.
Mr. Rapp?
I just want to, going back to Chancellor Center, one more. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I think you look at the options that are on here of the 3 properties that we had appraised, Chancellor, Richboro Middle, and Twining Ford. There are options for Richboro Middle and Twining Ford for the safety of the community, that if we moved out of those buildings, if we're going to keep the property to raise the buildings. You'll notice there is no such option on here for Chancellor Center. There's no thought process or in this whole thing about you know, doing anything negative to Chancellor Center. You know, no talk of tearing it down. I know there's signs that say save Chancellor, but as far as you know, we're concerned, there's no thought process where there's a need to, there's nothing to save Chancellor Center from, as far as administration.
Mr. Schrader?
I just have one reminder. Wrightstown is certainly one of the issues, but the other challenge that exacerbates 2034 and 2035 populations is adding the kindergarten, full-day kindergarten to the program. So the today issue changes next year, and then that changes when you add the capacity. So just a reminder that there's a differential between today and what full-day kindergarten will be in those buildings. That's the other challenge that is created.
Did you not put that in here because you have projections?
It is in there.
Okay, because you don't mention that there is a problem. in the elementary schools, do you? Maybe I missed it.
No, it does. What it shows you in if you go back to this diagram right here, this is 2034, 35 with full-day kindergarten, puts your elementaries at 97%, and you like to have elementaries at 90%. So the buildings that are affected greatly, if you, back to the realigned discussion, if you did some realignment, you could, however, you would still be over the capacities you generally want to see in elementaries.
Well, yeah, that was the next question out of my mouth. So you just said that even with realignment, we would still have a capacity issue at the elementary level at some point.
You will still feel significant pressure at the elementary buildings.
But if we move 6 out,
That changes everything, and that's why all of these realignments of grade structure, let's realign them 2 different ways here.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Mr. Rosen.
Thank you. I just want to say that I enjoy this process. I know it's probably anxiety-ridden for some of us around here, but I really do. I enjoy this. One of the reasons that I particularly enjoy this is because we're following a proper sensible sequence, which is something that some of you sitting around here have heard me say before. We've obtained demographics. We're planning buildings around those demographics and financing for the future of the school. We're not doing it backwards. And there's already been a couple of comments about, I'll use the word that was used, mistakes. So this sequence makes more sense to go around it. It's very difficult for an architect to say, well, plan me a building. Well, how many kids are coming in there? I don't know. We haven't done the demographics yet, but just, right? I mean, that doesn't work. So I think that's what I enjoy about this, is because it feels like, as long as I'm here, it feels like we're following in a good sequence. And I think that this body, the way it's conducting itself, is lending itself well to teasing out ideas that we can agree upon from a majority perspective. So I enjoy that. The other thing that Ms. Stone and I were talking about is the front page of the Schrader presentation has a nice map of the districts and all of the pinpoints of where the schools are spread across it, but it doesn't indicate some of the vacant ones that we've got, like Howes and Twiningford. It would be helpful to sort of see this at a larger, little bit more detailed situation. I actually asked for this, I think, last year at one point. And if major roads could be configured for it. One of the things that I think makes Chancellor wonderful to house administration is it's effectively in the middle of the district, and it has large major roads like the bypass that go by it. Whether I'm for or against moving in or staying in Chancellor or moving out is irrelevant. But when we think about putting another administrative building, that's got to stay relevant, to be somewhat central perhaps, if we can do it, and or near a main road. Similarly, if there's a discussion about building another middle school or building a kindergarten center or a 6th grade center or another elementary school or all the other things that we've talked about, putting it in the right spot with relation to the district is also very important. So seeing this and distributed as far as where major roads go may lend itself to either problems that we have to avoid or solutions that we haven't yet seen. So that would be nice to have. And 2 years ago with Chancellor Center, I'm pretty certain that budget did not include anything with the foundation or the masonry. So that was a concern that at least I had at the time, that this one that's being proposed now that we're looking at in the 2 or 3 or whatever we've come up with is a lot more extensive, holistic, and complete. And obviously it's several years later, so it costs more money, just like all of these things are going to cost more money in a couple of years also. But it's wonderful proportional analysis to look at everything the way it is. In other words, I think it would be unfair to say if we had fixed Chancellor for $6 million a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have to do anything today. There's still some parts there. And I think also regarding the redistricting that was done several years ago, had that been done differently, I don't know if that really solves the problems that we're looking at today also. So I just want to indicate that I'm enjoying this process, and I think that we're going at the right pace to get through it. And I encourage everybody to stay on that tack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have one more. I went back to look at the elementary school crowding, 2034 and on. First of all, this is 10 years out, so we don't know. On this table, one of the schools at 105% is Sulfine Stone that just finished the renovation. We added how many, 10 new classrooms. We had criticism that why are you spending money and adding classrooms when maybe you don't need them all? And here you are telling us that, hey, you should have added more classrooms because there is probably space for more classrooms. So question how good these overcrowded numbers are. Number two on your list is Wrightstown, which we know it's overcrowded to start with. We don't want to wait until 2034 to find out, and we're trying to find a solution for that. Also, we have the two schools that we plan to renovate on this list. So it is possible when we renovate the schools, we can add classrooms so the overcrowding doesn't happen. I mean, it is not very clear to me that we have overcrowding in our elementary schools, even with a full day kindergarten. I mean, this table is not telling me that. It's, and again, Sulfine Stone is what I'm going to use as an example because we just renovated it. We went through the process, we looked at the demography study, we did our best, and now we are saying that, oh, yeah, you should have done more. Is it? I mean, how good are these projections to start with? So
Yeah, may I just,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of help. So it is interesting, the demographic analysis not only showed district-wide, but they did it per building. And so I don't know that 6 years ago when the planning first time for Sulfine came up, that any of that said that that growth was there. So it's interesting to see what they found within the housing tracts that are within the Sulfine draw. And obviously they either have, and I can't remember exactly the neighborhoods there, so I apologize for that, whether it's new or whether it's turnover that's creating that. But whichever one it is driving that.
Both. And Cropper's doing, I think, a better job at capturing new construction. That was one of my complaints previously. So yeah, I mean, the numbers, you can't rely fully on them.
Yeah.
I really liked what Mr. Roosevelt had to say, and for those of you who don't know, he's in the business, so. Because the process does feel a little messy, because there's so many parts, moving parts to it. It's like, well, there's the educational concerns, there's the financial concerns, there's the, this is a really tough process, but I do feel like we're making a lot of progress, and I don't think there's anything wrong with just throwing out questions and ideas, and that's the whole point of this discussion. I do want to come out of this meeting with some clear idea as to what the next steps are, and if the administration and our consultants need any feedback from the board that they're not getting. I do have a couple of specific questions, and we've been talking about this. I mean, do we need to, the scope of this process, in order to get more solid figures on Chancellor Center, do we need to authorize a further study on Chancellor Center so that we get a full estimate on renovation costs, and or is that part of the scope of this study?
I think we can, all I'm gonna do is go back, and we know what the renovation costs would be if we were to do this without the other needs, but we know what the other needs are. So I'll incorporate those needs that wouldn't be part of a renovation cost into that number. So I'll work with David and we'll update the number and I'll clarify what has been added to it.
Great. Are there other specific projects or issues that Ms. Khan?
I did have a specific question. I know it came up and it reminded me, Mr. Roosevelt was talking about access or roadways. So, house track, can administration just refresh the memory of where that is for the audience? Because my question is going to be, I know where the location is, I pass by it every day, but I know it's a very large piece of property and it goes all the way back, maybe Second Street Pike on the other end, or somewhere, you can clarify, Dr. Sanko. If it's possible to have another accessible access to that, let's say if there is an option to build something on the house track, is there an option to have another access point off a major road, whether it's Second Street Pike or whatever that back road is on that end of the district?
So the house track is a 72.9 acre tract of land that the school district owns. We currently lease it out to Superior Sod, and it is on Route 413, Durham Road. If you were driving up Durham Road and you drive past Newtown Elementary School and then the police station, Newtown Police Station, municipal buildings, it's further up that road on the left-hand side. You will see a sign that says Superior Turf. So they pay us a nominal fee to lease that and grow sod. As far as another access on the back side of that, I don't know an answer to that. I think not, but I would, Doug, I don't mean to throw you or David on the spot here. I don't think that it would suffice to put a second entrance from the other side. I don't
know that there's enough, I don't think that you're close enough to the road on the other side of the property. Now, that's not, without looking, if someone's selling easement or something, I don't know offhand, but
I guess
it doesn't appear that way on face value.
Okay, I guess I'm only asking because as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about access, right? We talk about transportation, one of the options is to build on the house track, whatever that building could be potentially. One of the issues that I know is the fact that the entrance point is on 413. However, if there was another access point, it could be a possibility that it could be accessible and usable for, both ends of the district. That was my question, reasoning for asking that question.
I have a question.
Please.
So for the Chancellor Center, I think there is one option that is not listed here, because if we decide not to renovate and the administration to move, right? What happens to the building? That would be another option. So if we pack and go, the building is not gonna fix itself, right?
Right.
So, I know, sell it, we board it, what do we do with it? In a way that would be appropriate for both the school and the community. Because I know, like other properties, if we know we're not gonna demolish it, but what do? We have to spend money every month as long as we keep it going, and how expensive would that be? Something like that. What do we do with it? If we say we lease somewhere and we move out, what happens here?
Yeah, as long as you own it, you have to at least maintain it. You have to have minimum temperatures, right? You have to.
And what happens to the building? Is it gonna collapse after a while?
Slowly they decay over time.
You have to maintain it like you would if you were, occupying it. Otherwise, it will get tired on you.
Doug's being generous by tired.
Yeah, Dr. Singh?
I didn't hear you, Jeff.
I said, Doug's being generous by saying tired.
Okay, so we're gonna get some more solid figures on renovating this building. Does anybody have any specific needs for additional information that they want to make sure that our consultants understand?
Not that hasn't already been mentioned.
Okay. What's the next steps, please?
I think the next steps, I mean, we asked, I have pages and pages of notes here.
Yeah, sure.
I think we have some options to go back and take a look at, and develop, kind of increase. I don't think we've eliminated anything.
No, we haven't.
So I think we gotta add some more of these options that we've been talking about. I'm not gonna pick one out of here, but, there's, out of these notes, I think we need to regroup and look at all the options that we need to present, the next meeting and continue our discussions. I mean, if there's anybody that wants to add anything that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, that's what I was.
I think it would be important for us to find out the administration's thoughts on, would we look at 6 through 8 middle school? Or is that out of the question from the administrator's point of view? Is that something that you won't look at? Or like the 6th grade center, is that off the table? Then let us know what things are reasonable and what is off the table.
So, and I can answer some of that now. I think it was Ms. Khan that explained, there's natural break, after 5th grade to 6th grade. Our 6th graders are essentially on a middle school curriculum lines up on the education side. So a 6th to 8th grade band would make sense developmentally and academically for kids. On the other side of that, a 6th grade center, we are now transitioning students 2 times, from 5th to 6th grade and then from 6th to 7th. And depending upon where that 6th grade center would be located, we're pulling somebody all the way from the south side of the district and transporting them to the north side or vice versa. Kindergarten center was something that came up tonight. And then as we're sitting here and we've talked about this administratively, if we had a kindergarten center, then we would be asking our youngest riders to take the bus and go, again, the same example, from the north side to the south side, or the furthest point, it doesn't even matter, east or west in the district. So I don't think anything is off the table, but I think there is some logic and rationale, not just internally, but we know what's happening in other districts. And there are educational benefits to that grade span of 6, 7, and 8 that fall in line with, somebody said earlier tonight, there are 6th graders in the school with kindergarten students. And we have some 6-foot-tall 6th graders and not. And again, going back academically, Nicole Crawford and Tammy Gary will be able to speak in great detail on the academic benefits of that middle school model, if we were to decide to move in that direction to change the grade spans. So, yeah.
Mr. Higbee.
And I wrote something to Nikki earlier, and I'll say that because you said it. If we would, depending on what way we go, but when you talked about a 6th grade center, why do you have to have one? I'm going to say the same thing. Why can't you have 2? One in the north, one in the south. Use an existing elementary school for the center, and then transition to the middle school. I mean, I like either option. I'm just trying to think how this would work. I like the idea of 4 middle schools and feeding them in equally, because like I said, I'm going to fight tooth and nail to not have 3 middle schools. And I can have all Northampton come up because it's the same kids who are always going to get moved. So I like the idea of 4 if that would work. I like the middle school model if it would work for 6th, 7th, and 8th. But if we can't do that and we have to go to a 6th grade center, why do we have to have 1? Why can't we have 1 in the north and 1 in the south? You keep your feeder patterns the same, you keep all the kids together all the way through. And you could just use an existing elementary school, and it would alleviate all the pressure on all the current elementary schools that you have right now.
I think that's a fair question. We have not looked at 2 6th grade centers. I know that we would have to, and it's really not a big deal. We have to see how many kids we can fit in. I told you currently right now we're at somewhere about 818 6th graders. So you'd be looking at 2 425 size 6th grade centers. And, so when you look at a building like Goodnow, or you look at a building like Maureen Welch, they have more space than Holland Elementary or Wrightstown. So, we would have to study that a bit, but I don't think that's off the table either. That fits right into, if this happens, then there's gonna be a domino effect. What does it look like? So I'm happy to have our team go back and look at the possibility of 2 6th grade centers by way of our enrollment numbers and Cropper's projections.
Yeah, because the one thing I saw about Cropper's projections, I question about, for the next 10 years, our enrollment is not expected to increase. If minimally, I mean, it says 300 kids, but over the next 10 years, it's 300 kids, it's, if you even believe that. I mean, our population has been pretty stagnant now for the last 7 years. We're never gonna get back up, I hate to say it, we're never gonna get back up to 12,000 kids again. We're gonna stay where we're at. You don't see families anymore, families have less kids, they move up, you're gonna have some cyclical flows, but I don't ever think you're gonna get, unless something major happens that I don't think anybody foresees, I don't think we're gonna get up to a school district size of 1,200 kids. So what do our population's staying the same, so how much more room do we actually need? Like you were saying, do we really need more room for what we currently have, especially if the population is not gonna change? We just might have to reconfigure it somehow to make it work in our existing buildings.
Or redistrict. You shouldn't take that off the table either.
Well, that's-
Start doing.
So, I know there's a lot of schools that have like 6, 7, and 8 at different districts together. And based on my experience and from a lot of kids that I know, this is not an easy transition. Going from 6th grade to a middle school, and not all the kids are ready for it. So, because you have someone who is used to the homeroom and like the small school, and all of a sudden you are in this big space, you don't have a homeroom, you have to use your locker, figure out where you're going, and having someone who just finished 5th grade, having to do that, I know some kids will be much better doing it than others, but I know a lot of kids that have trouble doing it, or after finishing 6th grade. And I don't want to name anybody publicly, but something to consider. Again, it's different education models and their advantages and disadvantages. And even having a separate 6th grade, so there is transition that happens twice. I mean, that would be maybe the most taxing, because maybe if it's 6, 7, and 8 together, they made the transition and it's, they suffer in the first few months and then they're done. But we have to consider how mature they are to be able to make that transition.
Hey, your point's a good one, and I think regardless if we were to go to 2 6th grade centers, 1 6th grade center, if the board decided to build another middle school, it is gonna be a better fit for some than others. Under our current model, I was a middle school principal, and you're losing 50% of your population after 1 year. And, we talk about connecting with people and getting to know the students. Having served also as an elementary principal, I knew the families because I had the students and the siblings year after year after year. So I think it's hard for the staff and it's hard for the students that after 180 days, you lose 50% of your population going off to the high school. So there could be an advantage to, having the students 3 years versus 2. The 6th grade center, once again, you still have the transition from 6th and then 6th to 7th. I don't know that that's a deal breaker, but that's just the reality of with that kind of model, so.
Mr. Schrader had something to offer, and then Mr. Rubio.
I guess I'm listening to the dialogue and appreciating where everybody is, and you're trying to get somewhere from a master planning perspective so that you can solidify your next building decision so you can move ahead with the capital planning and all the other things. I get that. We deal with both of us deal with probably half of the school districts in the region, so we have a very good sense of what the conversations are. But you guys are speaking really intelligently about grade structures and about how that affects the students, which is critical. Administration clearly knows the most about how the students will be affected by each of these, but I almost feel like you have this tool that's pretty easy to plug things into if you come up with facility solutions to things. So this is not your challenge for the moment. Your challenge is, what's the right grade structure configuration and how many buildings go along with that from what I'm hearing. And it seems to me, I just wrote down 4 solutions to this from grade structure standpoint. You probably have 6 or 8. Is it worth backing up, talking about possible grade structure configurations, throwing some pros and cons under them, throwing them up there and starting with that and coming back to the facilities?
As in putting this process, a pause for this process?
Not at all. I think you're just taking one session to just investigate that higher level discussion.
And as I mentioned, education committee maybe, so, but well, that's a really good point, David, and we'll let Dr. Sanko and his team figure that out for us. You wanted to say something, Mr. Roosevelt?
I did, and it dovetails with what Mr. Schrader just said. So to talk about the parts that weren't in there. Regarding the renovation costs or whatever for the 2 middle schools, are the options that we viewed tonight considering 6, 7, and 8? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. So if it hasn't been illuminated from this conversation, I think that would be really helpful to update this tool with that option for those 2 middle schools. And that works into my request earlier for having a buildable envelope area and or a property area, like we heard 72, almost 73 acres for House. It would be nice to compare that to see, well, what's the size of Wrightstown? What's the size of Holland Middle and Newtown, so on and so forth. I think that's going to help lend itself to this. And it would be an interesting conversation to have a dovetail of education, to talk about grade bands with, I don't want to confuse people, but have it connected kind of to this facility conversation. Maybe for that one section, there's a little bit of overlap. I don't know how you want to do that.
I think when we have that prepared, well, I'm happy to bring the folks from the education side or vice versa, bring Tony and Jess to the education meeting. But, you know, when we started this, just like full day kindergarten, we said that this will touch every arm of the district, and this is a perfect example, tonight's entire conversation. You know, because it's buildings, it's education, it's age and grades of students, it's transportation, it's the curricular area, so it'll touch every arm of the district. So.
Good, thank you. Well, I'm glad we started at 5 o'clock. We've been at it for 3 hours and 45 minutes. Does anybody have anything else? Do you have any asks from the board before we?
I just have closing
Please.
remark if everyone's.
If the board's ready to move on? Okay.
Good. Oh, yeah, we gotta do public.
Oh, we will, but I thought you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that, just a reminder that we're still in the concept options phase. We are not in a completion phase. We do not have a completed master plan yet. So we have not eliminated anything. We've added a bunch of stuff. So we are not in the final phase yet.
Good, thank you. I think it was a very successful meeting. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Schrader. Thanks, Jess. We'll move on to public comment. And we just ask that anybody who wants to speak, try to speak for 3 minutes if you would. And identify yourself and where you live. If not the street address, the borough or the township. Please go.
I'm Jenny Broderick. I live in Wrightstown Township. I have 2 children at Wrightstown Elementary, a 6th grader and a 7th grader. I want to thank you all because this is quite a task that you have ahead of you. It was very interesting to see the numbers and the costs associated with that. Those costs are pretty hefty, so you have a lot of decisions to make here. Speaking to having a 6th grader, I would agree with your points that my son, turn 12 in September, so he's a little bit older for his grade. He is ready to go to middle school. I, as a parent, would be very happy to send him to middle school. I am also a sixth grade committee on the PTO, so I am in the school, I'm seeing all the sixth graders. I don't disagree that there are a handful of sixth graders that would not be ready to go to middle school, but I don't think that based on the handful that I see, is any reason to not consider that option. As a parent, I love the option of combining 6th through 8th grades. I grew up living on Penn High School, we had K through 5, 6, 7 was middle school, 8, 9 was junior high, and 10 through 12 was high school. I loved it. I love switching every couple of years. I think keeping the middle school 6 through 8 also, so that they're not going for that transition, I'm sorry, middle school right now is 7th grade, having them there for 3 years, I think that that's a great idea as well. My concern in the meantime is not so much for my 6th graders, because we are North Beating track, I cannot see that. Gene Pay, my concern is for my 2nd grader. He is in he's one of the first grades at Wrightstown to be capped. So K obviously is not full day yet, 1st grade has 2 sections, 2nd grade has 2 sections. And I did a quick calculation here, based on the sections right now, with the capping, it won't be until 2028, the 2028 school year, when everything will be 2 sections from next year. So we have 3 grades in there that have 3 sections right now, the only one that doesn't is 5th grade. I also love the idea temporarily, nobody wants to be realigned, nobody wants to be realigned. I love Wrightstown, I don't want to leave Wrightstown. Send the 6th graders to Newtown. That's a great idea. In the interim, until you can figure out that, as a parent, yes, I'm on board, because I also still feel like my 6th grader is ready for middle school. And I don't know middle school numbers. I know Sun's class right now, there's 71 students. They are on the smaller size for Wrightstown. I think that you could have up to 85. I don't know what the capacity issues are there. I just don't Thank you. This is like, I had been messaging with Nikki, and this is a significant undertaking that you all have, and I really appreciate your efforts, and I look forward to seeing you in your experience.
Thank you, thank you. Who else would like to speak, anyone? Yes, please.
Hi, Tara Courtney McLaughlin, Newtown Borough. Thank you for printing these out. These are super. It's GRUNDE -MCLAUGHLIN, if everybody's writing it down. Thank you for all your hard work, and I just want to reiterate what everybody's done. I'm really impressed with my school board, so thank you. I also want to thank you for, at your last month meeting, when you were doing some of the summer maintenance was up, and I came along and told my high schooler about it, and he said, good, because when he was walking down the hallway towards the band room, he got dripped on the head. So that water infiltration needs to be done. I have a question for Mr. Rapp about the grants. You had asked Mike Fitzpatrick about it, Mr. Brian. You said our congressman, so I assume that's who you meant. Did you talk to anybody at the state level?
Yes.
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 Okay, all right. I wanted to see if those had been sought as well. I don't know if it makes a difference for school boards, but it does for the municipality. If the project is in a written plan that you have, like your comprehensive plan or like your facilities plan, and then you go to get a grant, they're much more likely to say, yes, because we can see this is something you wanted and you've laid out your plan. You just didn't walk into it and say, hey, we think we'd like this money. So I would recommend, in addition to all the reasons that Tracy laid out and that it's cheaper than building a new one, putting the Chancellor Center into the facilities plan so that it's written, so that it can support grants and public monies to help ameliorate the cost. I didn't start my timing, but if we're going to bring 6th graders in, this is what the Board of Education thinks, but I would say that perhaps they have some slight separated zone, protected team type of thing, more so than the upper kids where you've got vaping and my 7th grade, my daughter's friend came home crying to her mom because she's got to wear makeup because all the girls are wearing mascara, and so she has to do who's going to fit in. And I'm like, you don't need an 11-year-old having a feeling like she has to wear mascara and bake. So therefore, I would ask that we recognize that they still are younger and they haven't hit that full-on puberty just yet. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Nickel, Newtown Borough. Again, I appreciate everybody's time. Just curious, over the last 5 years, with the capacity we're at now, how much do we think we've kind of impacted or failed to educate the kids over the last, because of capacity? Have we been able to do it? Has the capacity been over the last 5 years? Does that make sense?
You're asking if there's been any shortfall in the educational program due to capacity issues?
That's correct.
Somebody could get back to you on that.
Because it doesn't change over the next 10 years. You brought it up yourself about the education over that time period. To me, it doesn't seem like a capacity issue. It's just where it's put everything. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a separate issue.
That's my understanding.
We're still providing a world-class education, the reason we all live in this area, right?
Correct. You can always do better.
Sure.
You had mentioned, what was you said the appraised value of the building here, this building for Chancellor, was like 700,000, is that right? 900,000?
It was under $1 million.
No, that was not Chancellor.
Negative.
We can.
Was that an offer?
No,
It's fun. We can get that number to you.
The number doesn't matter, whether it's 700,000 or 900,000. The land itself is worth way more than that. My assumption is it's worth 700,000 because of the repairs that are needed, right?
I'm not sure.
That's my guess. If you, unlike Richboro, if you tore it down, you can tear it down, the land is worth a lot of money. Here, the land is worth a lot more if you can tear it down, but you're never gonna be able to tear the building down, right? Yes. Sorry, but you're never gonna be able to tear it down. With the repairs that are needed, the $5 million for repairs, if you were to make the repairs for $5 million, would the appraised value hypothetically go up? Because you can't tear the building down. If you would sell the building 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and say, hey, we want to move the admin, would the building still be worth 700 grand, or would it be worth more than that because you no longer have to make the repairs? Is that, yeah. By making the repairs today, you're fixing the inherent problem of why you sell the building. If selling the building was
Yeah, what's the use of it?
Not completely.
you're gonna regain some. If you repair Richboro Elementary, or middle school and tore it down, everything you put into it's gone. If you put money into this, it's not wasted money. You're gonna gain at least some of that money back if you chose to sell it. What's that? To whoever you're gonna sell the building to, right? The discussion that's being sold for a variety of reasons. I would say it's an A+ location for something. If another year goes by or 2 years go by, the repairs are not going to be $5 million, they're going to be $6 million. Every year is going to get worse. If you're not prepared to move out of the building or do something with the administrative, minimally, a quick decision is to try and make the minimal repairs to stay functional. The money you put into it, you should at least get some of it back, right? It's not, the building's not going to go down. You can imagine you get some of that money back. It's kind of my thought.
That's a good point. You're at 4 minutes, so.
About the last, one last question, just whether the administration or the school board wants to be in the building. Does the building mean anything to the school board? To me, it's, if you were to abandon the building, close it up, not sell it, just leave it deteriorate, or sell it or do whatever, it is the origin of Council Rock School District. It is the people back in the garage, it's your great grandmother's dining room table, just because there's a new one, a pottery barn, you don't throw the other one out. There is some nostalgia for the school district to maintain the have the building in some capacity, even if that avenue moves out. Again, that's why I would lean on the school board, feel like this is a really important building within the district. I don't believe it'll ever get torn down. I feel like it should stay with the school board, and investing money into just basic repairs so it doesn't deteriorate further can't hurt.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm well over it. You can have a minute of my time.
Chris Grimes, I'm invested, so I live here in the borough, so I'm invested in this building as well, but I've also got 2 young kids who are now terrified about what the future looks like. But my kids are gonna feel the ramifications of everything we talked about. I just wanted to start by saying, I really appreciate the master plan work that you guys are doing. I think there's some really intelligent conversation that was happening today. I would encourage you guys to make this something that gets revisited every 3 years, so that, I mean, we need, in business, we're doing this every 3 years. We have to have a plan for what this looks like. I think if I step back, I think the next evolution, I think, needs to look at the financial reality of what some of this is seeing. Like when I was here in the beginning, we can borrow 83 million. You can come up with a bunch of different scenarios about how you play this out. But I mean, all of it looks to me like you've got $200, $400 million worth of options. Like that is huge, huge dollars that the taxpayers and residents are going to have the same sticker shock I did when they see this. I would say some of the points that were brought up, like if you've got $0 options to redistrict, like that is sensitive, but that is something that we absolutely need to look at. I mean, that's versus spending $140 million to build it because we don't want to look at that option. I would encourage us to look at options like that, which comes back to this building as well. And I would agree with all the points that you said. I would look at the cost to build another administrative building being $20+ million versus $7 or less to make repairs to this, especially if there is grant money that potentially could be on the table to remediate some of that. Feels like it's putting money in the places that I think somebody made a statement, we're in the business of educating people. I want my dollars to go into the work that has to happen to educate the students into the high schools, into the middle schools. I don't want to quickly make a leap of going from 7 million or 6 million or whatever it takes to do some basic repairs to a gem of a building to why not double or triple it to go make another building that's 20 million. That's a huge leap on top of the enormous financial complexities I see you all have to tackle.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Cheryl Kearns Hills, a lifelong resident of Newtown. I private school teacher now. But again, to segue on some of these things, and thank you to the board. My learning process, talk about a process that has been very steep. I'm learning. I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate your discussions. As Mr. Roosevelt said about having a central location, this place is a landmark, as I heard mentioned down here. This building is almost 155 years old. It started in the 1870s when PA's education decided all students deserve an education. And that's the message I'm still hearing here today. So with that, that's one of the early ones. No other district has bragging rights. They have a building that is old to use. I hear, as I'm hearing here, I think it's an easy decision to make the repairs. The focus belongs on those classrooms, those students, and that's where we go. Make that decision. I say it's black and white. Decide to revamp, and let's make our future worthy of the past. And I think with your discussion, you're heading us in that direction. And I thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Board? We good? Oh, please.
I would argue
that much more for sixth graders to stay at the elementary school if they were still in Mist Hills.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Where we are.
Right?